Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Yountville Town Council. It is Tuesday, March 3rd at 6 p.m. For those of you joining us for the very first time in council chambers this evening, you'll find the agendas and supporting documents on the wall next to the door where you came in the little plastic bins there. Help yourself to that information. We are being broadcast live on Channel 28, and this session is going to be video archived and will be rebroadcast again Friday at noon, I believe, on Channel 28. With that, I would ask that you please turn off your cell phones and pagers while you're in council chambers, and we'll get started. May we have the roll, please?
Councilmember Dutton.
Here.
Councilmember Chilton.
Here.
Councilmember Moeller.
Here.
Vice Mayor Dunbar.
Here.
Mayor Saucerman.
Here. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We met in closed session on February 17th, and just earlier this afternoon. Are there any reportable actions from those closed sessions?
Yes, Mayor, there are. On the February 17th closed session, the council provided direction for the town manager to develop a request for proposals for town attorney services and to schedule the interviews that you had earlier this afternoon. And there's no reportable action as to this afternoon's session. There is a regular agenda item tonight with which the council will consider the appointment of town attorney on an interim basis.
All right, good, thank you. Item 6, adoption of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda this evening? Councilmember Moeller?
I would like to make a motion that we remove item 10 from the agenda and continue item 10 to a specific time that's going to allow us appropriate amount of time to notify the press and the public that we want to reopen the public hearing on the revised final development plan. Currently, the public hearing's closed, and we have an entirely new staff report, entirely new resolution, and I think we need to have public hearing on that.
We have the option of reopening the public hearing at the time we address the matter.
But if they're not, the public hasn't been notified in time, they won't have time to come and prepare and talk about it. So I think we need to give them time to do that.
From a legal point of view, you are permitted to reopen the public hearing, and that's a standard procedure, and you're permitted to do that. You could also decide that you wanted to delay it if there was some reason that you wanted to do that.
Yeah. The matter was previously continued from the last meeting to this meeting, and again, like council says, we do have the option of reopening the public hearing.
I just feel that, I think that, there's a lot of people that, when they saw this on the agenda as closed public hearing, nobody felt that they could come and talk about it and bring up issues with the staff report and the new resolution. So I think it would be, in our best interest to be as open as we could about that, to let them know that, we do have an open public hearing if that's what we're going to do, and give them time to prepare and come to talk about it. I think that, there's some risk in not opening the public hearing and duly notifying people that they can come and talk about that.
Actually, I'd like to clarify that, because the idea of reopening the public hearing is completely appropriate. There's also, the reason we have public hearing is exactly to provide notification and notice to a identified target per ordinance, and to reopen it and renotice it also has particular issues that are potentially associated with it. The matter was continued, and the reason you notice the public hearing is so that the affected parties had the option to be there on the last council meeting. The continuation And what we're doing is, as the council maybe recalls, you opened your hearing, and then you closed your hearing, and you began council discussions on the item. And then at that point, you provided direction to continue it. I think it's certainly perfectly appropriate that the council would reopen the public hearing, take the comments from anybody that may be there, but you could face, I'm not uncomfortable with saying that you could face some concerns from people that say, I'm here today, I'm here for this item, and I'm wanting to participate, and you're not letting me. So there's both sides of that need to be weighed by the council.
So, I mean, I think that the risk in not officially opening a public hearing would, be numerous if we're willing to keep discussing that.
Okay. I have a motion from Councilmember Moeller to continue item 10 to a date certain. Do I have a second?
I ask one clarifying question. Typically, it does say public hearing closed. Is the reason it says that because it was continued? I think typically, in many matters that have been brought before this council, that public hearing is always reopened of a development, for example. Those are not continued to a date certain. Is that the differentiation in this terminology?
What you have here is the council took an action to close the public hearing. And the footnote here is to remind people, and as legal counsel has said, you can continue moving forward with the discussions. The direction and expectation of staff is that based on the direction that you provided, council will reopen the public hearing. The people that were attending, watching the meeting saw that. It's on the agenda item. The footnote about public hearing closed is not to say that the public's not welcome to comment. It's just that the officially scheduled public hearing was on that prior date. And you do not typically reschedule and re-notify those. What we're talking about here are the people generally within the 300, 500-foot notice range, and we also have typically our 10-day legal posting. What you really have with public hearing is what we would call public comment, where an audience is made sure that they're aware of it, and that's the intent behind the noticing. And what we have here is the council, the town clerk has provided direction so that if the council wanted to reopen, the footnote's there to let you do that and to remind everybody that that process was moved forward. If we need to look at how we want to massage the wording in the future, I'll certainly work with the council and town clerk on that. But the intent really here was, to let everybody know where that status of that discussion was.
Well, but my issue with the whole thing is that several people saw that there was a new staff report, there's a whole new resolution, they saw the public hearing was closed, and they made a decision that they couldn't come and speak. And I want to be as transparent as we possibly can to give them information that public hearing, if we do decide to reopen it, is open, they can come and they'll have time to prepare their comments, read the report, address the council, and we can consider as much information as possible in making our decision.
I have a motion on the table. Is there a second? Seeing no second, the motion fails. Item 10 will remain on the agenda as stated.
Mayor, I would like to make an agenda change to item 9 and put presentation B in front of presentation A. Not that the representatives from the American Red Cross would not love to stay and be thoroughly engaged by your State of the Town address, but just this way it gives them the option to watch it on television.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Any more changes or corrections to tonight's agenda? If not, can I have a motion to adopt?
I'll move for adoption of the agenda as corrected or changed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
All right, that motion carries. Item 7, public comment on matters not listed on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone that would like to comment on anything that is not listed on tonight's agenda? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Judith Caldwell, 6880 Jefferson Street. 3 years ago, I took our son to show me baseball camp in Branson, Missouri, and I returned to my hotel room receiving a call informing me that my mother had died. Needing to get Michael, I phoned the camp director, and knowing the emotional toll that this would take, he suggested that we wait till morning after a good night's sleep. Next day, I entered the camp office where an elderly gentleman had just written a letter on the importance of grandmothers in the life of children. The camp director and Michael entered, and I gave the sad news, and the kind elderly man comforted us and handed Michael his letter. With great appreciation, I said to this stranger, "If there's anything we can ever do to reciprocate your kindness, please let me know," and gave him a card with my name, phone number, and Yountville address. On the way to the airport, Michael told me, "Mom, the man who wrote the letter was Gaylord Perry, one of the most famous living National Baseball Hall of Famers of all time." Spring, 2 years ago, our phone rang in Yountville. "Hi, this is Gaylord Perry. My wife and I are at the Napa Valley Lodge around the corner from you, and we'd like to stop by." Ironically, it was just in time for Yountville Little League practice. So Gaylord drove to the baseball field and took the time to show each little team player how to pitch in just a little better way. And then he signed a baseball for every little Yountville boy there, and then drove to Hurley's for boar steak. Mr. Perry will visit Yountville again next Tuesday evening at 4:30 to do a fundraiser at Grosinger Estate Room for Napa Babe Ruth, the league that Yountville's teenagers now play for. The Monday before, he will be in San Francisco being inducted into the San Francisco Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame with Billie Jean King. Gaylord sent several boxes of his personal memorabilia to Yountville for auction, wanting all these proceeds to go to the little boys. This baseball legend is notorious for doctoring baseballs and throwing spitters. He was the first pitcher to win the Cy Young Award in both leagues. But he has proven to me and to Yountville baseball that he's also a great humanitarian whose heart really is bigger than the universe. And so I'm here this evening to invite you, our town leaders, and all community members to welcome Mr. and Mrs. Perry back to Yountville again next Tuesday in the old Compadres building just before the Focus gathering. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Public comment? Anyone else? Alrighty, seeing none, I'll close the public comment. It's nice that he's visiting. That's great. Move along to consent calendar. Are there any changes or corrections to tonight's consent calendar?
Mayor, I'd like to pull item C, please, for discussion.
All right.
I would like to pull item B for discussion.
Okay. That leaves A, D, and E. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve consent calendar items A, D, and E.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Item C. Councilmember or Vice Mayor Dunbar?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to just have staff explain the discrepancy in a very positive way between the $400,000 bid estimate on the street resurfacing and the bid that we are being asked to accept. And also, if there's an explanation for the additional work that's proposed for item 1 for the total bid package.
I'd be pleased to. Briefly, the short answer is the town always attempts to identify in our bid packages, based on funding, if there's additional work, and it gives us the ability, if we receive good bids, to do more work within our budget. The favorable circumstance that we find ourselves in is that there were 18 bidders on this particular project, whereas historically the town in the prior markets has seen potentially only 3 or 4 bidders. So basically, the good news is what previously, 3-4 years ago, roughly cost the town about $400,000. In today's economic situation, one of the positive silver linings are that they're, much like we saw with our sewer projects, we're getting very favorable bid results, and the result is that we received a bid that's almost 50% less than what the original engineer's estimate for the paving project. So it's very favorable, and we will also be looking to see if there may be some additional projects that are relevant to street paving that we may advance to take advantage of that cost savings.
So we're allowed to consider their bid because, as it's stated in the staff report, the base bid is the determining factor for the low bid, not the additional alternative.
That is correct.
But we are still allowed to engage them in that additional work once they've satisfied.
And when we put the final contracts together, we may identify additional work, and one of the footnotes is that we will also negotiate based on unit prices, and what we actually pay for that will be based on the original low bid.
So the request tonight, though, is for the $201,000, not the $178,985.
That is correct.
And that would be, we're setting a ceiling on the additional work.
Correct, unless we choose, based on their work performance. As we indicated to you previously with our sewer, if we had favorable experience with the contractor, we would come back and look at additional projects. So that's what the recommendation would be, again, that we make sure that we have a good outcome with this contractor before we add additional work.
Thank you.
Make a motion?
Didn't know if anyone else had any.
More discussion on the matter?
Yeah, I'll move that we adopt Resolution 2760-09, awarding the bid and approving construction contract with North Bay Construction for the street resurfacing program ST-01 in the amount of not to exceed $201,675.50.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Consent calendar, item B. Councilmember Chilton?
Yes, I just wanted this item to be pulled just to make comment. This item is appointing our new finance director, Kathleen, who's in the back of the room tonight. Wave, Kathleen, to the crowd here. The mayor and I sat in on interviews of several finalists. I'm really pleased that Kathleen is coming on to the town. So congratulations. I assume the rest of my colleagues will agree when we pass this motion. We look forward to it, and I think you've got a lot of exciting times ahead. As it's an interesting time to be coming on, and Yountville's in a great position compared to most, but it doesn't mean there aren't challenges that we will face. So congratulations. Is there other comments? I'll make a motion to approve consent calendar item B.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Yes, and welcome, Kathleen.
And while we're at it, I'd also like to acknowledge the hard work of our interim finance director, Cindy Rosenberg. She has really provided, I think, a good continuity as we've attempted to keep everything on the up and up and get our books in order. And we will be getting all the stuff submitted for the comprehensive annual financial report, and you will see that in April for your consideration. But it's been a pleasure to work with Cindy, and she really has, I think, helped us keep the ship, accounted for, and all the debits and credits in the right spot. And she will also be working on some transition planning with Kathleen so that it's not just a raw transition. There'll be some overlap, and then Kathleen will spend a little bit of time, and then Cindy will come back down and enjoy some of our better spring weather and do a little check-in and go over some stuff. So, again, I want to acknowledge Cindy's efforts.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks, Cindy. Okay, item 9, presentations. We moved item B up to presentation of proclamation acknowledging March as American Red Cross Month. If I could have the Red Cross representatives join me at the dais, the podium. This is a proclamation declaring March as American Red Cross Month, whereas each March, the American Red Cross and its local community chapters are formally recognized for their essential humanitarian role in the cities and counties they serve, and whereas every day Napa County Red Cross volunteers and employees provide essential services in this community to help those affected by everything from house or apartment fires, floods, hurricanes, and other natural and human-caused disasters, thanks to the generous support of the people in Napa County. And whereas for more than 91 years, the citizens of Napa County have relied on the Red Cross to provide disaster relief, water safety, and first aid, CPR, and AED training. And whereas over the past year, Napa County Red Cross responded to 17 residential fires and helped 44 displaced people with emergency food, clothing, a warm, dry bed to sleep in, and whereas over the past year, 5,437 individuals learned life-saving skills through 656 classes offered by this chapter, and whereas over the past year, nearly 185 teenagers have enrolled in American Red Cross babysitting training courses in Napa County, and whereas the Napa County Red Cross conducted 27 disaster education presentations for our community, and whereas 162 volunteers, 12,707 hours of service to the chapter, serving as members of the board, instructors teaching life-saving skills, disaster action team members, or disaster volunteers who traveled to other areas of the country when a disaster struck. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Cynthia Sossaman, Mayor of, and on behalf of the town of Yountville, do hereby proclaim March 2009 as American Red Cross Month, especially during this extraordinary time for our country. We encourage all members of our community to support the Napa County chapter of the American Red Cross and its noble humanitarian mission, dated March 3rd, 2009.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the support from the town of Yountville. Last week, President Obama actually declared nationally that this would be American Red Cross Month during the month of March. So we really appreciate, with our ongoing volunteer efforts, to have the support of our local communities. Our local Red Cross chapter does take care of all of Napa County, stretching from Calistoga all the way down to American Canyon. We are looking for, should you know the right person, board representation down in American Canyon as well as up in Calistoga. Yountville, we've got a really good showing right now on the board, so thank you again for that support. That being said, during the month of March, we will be offering free CPR classes, and the 14th of March is designated as our free CPR day. There is information to be had at the American Red Cross local website. So if there are any questions, you're welcome to contact our office, but we appreciate any support. And the last thing is that we did just recently conduct a study. It was a survey group to find out what Napa County understood about the Red Cross and what we do. A lot of people understand that we do CPR. Some understand that we do babysitting classes and that we do swim classes. As you mentioned as well, kind Mayor, we also do the disaster action team training to get people in the community involved in setting up shelters. What is not realized oftentimes is that the American Red Cross is not a nationally funded group. We rely entirely on local funding. And, when we had the flood a few years ago down in Napa, the National Red Cross did come back and provide funds to, we spent over $500,000 helping over 500 families during that crisis. But on a normal basis, our operating budget is funded by the local community. So if you can help us spread that word here in Yountville and beyond the borders of the town, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you again for all of your support and help.
Thank you. The next item is our State of the Town Annual Review. So it's rather lengthy. I'll try to be brief. But the entire review will be posted on our website and as well as available to anyone who would like a copy. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll try to paraphrase as much as I can, but it should take a few moments, so if you'll bear with me. And if you can't hear me, please holler out and let me know. About a year ago, I sat up here and told you how wonderful everything was in Yountville, about new leadership and management, progress on communication and public outreach, a focus on public safety, and ongoing efforts toward environmental sustainability, careful planning and capital improvements, all the while keeping a sharp eye on our financial position and budget. Today I remain cautiously optimistic in spite of all the problems the state and the nation's economy has endured over the past year. Yountville is hanging tough. I know some are suffering the effects of the economic downturn, but as your leaders working together and through careful management and planning, Yountville will pull through these trying times and hopefully come out smelling like the crush of ripe grapes. I don't have to tell you what many of you already know, that Yountville has just been named one of the top 20 best towns in the West by Sunset Magazine. I'll talk a little bit more about that as I conclude, but now I want to talk about what transpired in 2008 and the outlook for 2009. This past year, the Town Council built our annual budget and town work plan around the following goals and objectives: ensuring continued fiscal responsibility, complete the master plan for the community center and library, improve and enhance communication with Yountville, develop and implement organizational, structural change, and update the general plan reflecting on build-out of the town. In July 2008, the Town Council adopted a balanced budget including a general fund of $4.8 million, water operations at $915,000, wastewater operations at $775,000, debt service of $265,000, and 32 proposed capital projects totaling $15.6 million, of which $12.4 million was for the community center and library project. The general fund budget will operate in a surplus position of $1 million with estimated general fund revenues of $5.8 million and expenditures of $4.11 million. This level of fiscal responsibility allows the town to increase our general fund undesignated reserve from $775,000 to $825,000. The council also approved the sale of the NBA Kern Water to the City of Napa, culminating 5 years of work that began in 2004 at the height of the building moratorium for the town. The first step of securing a long-term water supply agreement with the Veterans Home for the use of Rector water to meet all future water needs of the town was the first milestone in the plan. Completion of the municipal well provided the second major milestone, and the sale of the NBA Kern Water stabilized water rates and provided a drought emergency fund that was the next important step. Upon completion of the Title 22 and 100% recycled water project will be the final step in securing all future water supply and wastewater treatment needs for the town. The town will continue to be proactive in implementing water conservation measures. The council took further steps to allocate the proceeds from the sale of the water rights to establish a $2 million drought water reserve fund bank, made a $900,000 payment to its OPEB reserve and will soon be addressing the allocation of $880,000 to the general fund during the next fiscal year's budget discussions. More importantly to note, the town will avoid $250,000 to $300,000 in NBA Kern expenses in the future years for an emergency water source that would have limited availability in severe drought conditions anyway. This cost reduction results in a savings of approximately 30% for the Water Enterprise Fund and will result in an immediate and ongoing savings of approximately 5% to the general fund, which has subsidized and continues to subsidize the water fund and your water rates. The Town Council finally completed the master plan for the community center and library project early in the fiscal year and awarded a bid for construction. Groundbreaking took place in August, and the project is progressing rapidly and within budget. Town Council continues to work diligently to bring the cost of the proposed community center and library project, including renovation of the old community hall, in under budget. To date, less than $100,000 of the project's adopted $750,000 contingency fund has been allocated. The council has an active ad hoc committee working with staff and the project team monitoring the project and budget decisions. We look forward to the opening of the new facility in the fall of 2009 and are actively working with staff to develop and implement a business plan that will provide a combination of recreation and leisure programming to meet the diverse needs of our community and to provide community space for our local community groups and nonprofit organizations in a cost-effective manner. Our goal is to make the new facility truly the center of our community. The town is making significant one-time capital investments in technology this year designed to allow improved organizational effectiveness and customer service, including complete replacement of its computer server environment, construction of our first controlled server room, issuance of an RFP for comprehensive financial software to replace our antiquated financial human resources software system that will support organizational needs and improve our ability to document and produce reports, as well as support online and e-commerce services. Software selection and purchase is scheduled for this spring. Purchase and installation of video web streaming and archiving technology to allow for webcasting of Town Council and ZDRB meetings with video archiving of the minutes for public access. This will improve staff productivity by changing from detailed minutes to action minutes supported by the video archive. It will also improve citizen access as to those with a computer being able to watch the meetings live, and if you've missed a meeting, you can view the video archive. The town has purchased the technology and is currently in the training phase with a go-live date expected in late March or early April 2009. And of course, all of this has and is being accomplished while maintaining our current staffing levels at 24 town employees with a focus on reviewing and improving our service delivery effectiveness. Other notable accomplishments for the year were town staff implementing significant changes to the Yountville shuttle service based on the successful community and dine and ride shuttle program, service demonstration project, business feedback, and resident input from community workshops. The shuttle now runs extended evening hours and provides a regular connection from downtown to the Veterans Home and Lincoln Theater on a trial basis. Ridership has increased, and additional marketing and promotion of the improved service will be necessary. Staff is continuing to make improvements to town landscaping and public parks. We've seen a lot of public comment on that, and it's all been positive. The town has made organizational change in the parks maintenance operations, which have resulted in very visible and positive improvements in the level of parks maintenance. Council has provided direction on a draft of a town-wide forestation plan to include recommendations for a multi-year plan and funding addressing the sustainability of significant trees within the community. The plan has been prepared by a registered arborist, Bill Pramick. The council listened to the concerns of the community related both to the safety of and the interest in saving a heritage oak tree along Hopper Creek. Council has deferred action to take down the tree pending review of possible alternatives by an ad hoc committee comprised of 2 council members and a number of interested citizens. Council directed completion of the initial study of the hydrologic conditions of Hopper and Hinman Creeks, providing information necessary to determine the feasibility of future flood and drainage improvements. Phase 2 of this process will identify specific projects such as Hopper Creek stream bed restoration, various bank stabilization projects, and possible replacement of the Oak Circle and Mulberry Street bridges over Hopper Creek. Council established a new Parks and Community Services Commission as an additional advisory forum involving community members to provide input and direction into the town's parks, recreation, leisure services, arts and cultural issues, and council has just appointed the new members, and the first meeting is scheduled next month. Ongoing infrastructure improvements are at the forefront, and town staff has caused a significant reduction in water loss through our water lines by investing in leak detection equipment and by increasing preventative maintenance and replacing aging laterals. In 2006, the town experienced a water loss level of 20%, and we are now at plus or minus 3%. Compared to industry averages of 10 to 12%, I think that's a great accomplishment. This level of work saves operating costs, staff time, and more importantly, helps conserve a vital resource. The Town Council authorized the advancement of planned sewer line replacements. I know you've all noticed the Washington Street construction. Originally planned for future years to this year to take advantage of very favorable construction bid results. Over 24 companies bid on our recent projects, and the end result will save the town significant dollars and get the work done sooner. It's a win-win situation, and it helps to keep local contractors working. Planning efforts continue for the modernization project of the wastewater treatment plant, or the joint treatment plant as it's sometimes referred to, since we are partners with the California Veterans Home at Yountville. This project seeks to upgrade the tertiary level of treatment to meet what is referred to as Title 22 unrestricted level of treatment standards. This is the highest level of treatment that a wastewater treatment facility can attain. Upgrading the plant to this standard, we also increase the capacity determined by the Regional Water Quality Control Board by increasing our recycled water customers and their off-site storage. We may be able to attain a zero discharge status with our permit issued by the Regional Board. When completed, the town will be in a position to modify its existing discharge permit and eliminate the need for costly diversion structure in the Napa River, increase the rated treatment capacity of the plant, increase the amount of recycled water put to use for vineyard irrigation, obtain a zero discharge permit status, upgrade system controls including safety provisions, apply for funding and or no low-cost interest funding from available federal stimulus programs for the construction of Phase 1, and the master plan process for future upgrades, including the possibility of solar power. Thank you, Mike. With respect to planning and building activities, there were a significant number of private development projects that were processed by the town's planning staff, the ZDRB, and town council this past year, including 18 commercial projects and 10 residential projects, and I'm not going to list all the details for you or mention each and every one, but just some of the notables were, of course, the Bartisono Inn, the Community Center, Hotel Luca, the French Laundry Inn, Yountville Inn expansion and affordable housing project, masonry, the Vita restaurant, and the project that we'll be discussing tonight, Sorrento, and Bottega restaurant and Napa Style. And as I stated, there are a number of residential projects we also addressed this year. Some of the ZDRB activities, we appointed Mr. John Stitt and Ms. Marita Dornbecker to the Zoning and Design Review Board to fill vacant positions. The ZDRB has begun a discussion to develop recommendations for the Sustainable Building Practices Ordinance for new commercial and residential construction, and they will be discussing recommendations on street frontage standards for the commercial zoning districts, as well as starting discussions on developing recommendations for greenhouse gas reduction standards. So having done that, we're going to I'm going to discuss the challenges and opportunities for 2009-2010. Our goals for 2009 and 2010, it's weird saying that, maintain fiscal soundness through the current economic situation, maintain and enhance the town's public facilities and infrastructure, develop and implement a business plan for the new community center, improve communication between town government and the community, and update our vision for character and quality of life in our community. And these were the goals that we set at our most recent retreat. With respect to our fiscal soundness, as of December 31st, 2008, the town had, 2008, the town received 53% of the budgeted revenue for the current fiscal year ending June 30, 2009. The Town Council recognizes that in spite of our good financial situation, it is prudent to plan for a reduction in overall TOT revenue, which generates up to 70% of our total general fund revenues. Town Council will be working with staff on plans to scale back current year expenditures and, more importantly, begin the planning process for reduced expenditure plan for fiscal year 2009-2010. This is prudent fiscal planning as we develop a budget and service level plan that is within the means of this community. As residents, we need to be prepared for the possibility that there could be changes from what we have experienced and grown to expect and take for granted if there is less revenue available to fund those service levels. In spite of the economic downturn and recession, all is not doom and gloom. Yountville has reason to be optimistic about our future. Fall 2008 set record TOT receipts, which are tempered by a downturn in the current slow season, which is January through March. We will continue to monitor TOT activity trends. Increase in total room capacity from 340 rooms to 402 rooms with the opening of the Bardessono in February. The full impact of this increase is yet to be determined, but over the long term will result in increased level of general fund revenue available to fund town services. Hotel Luca continues with construction and is scheduled to open late 2009, early 2010, with an additional 20 rooms to bring our total to 422 rooms. The Yountville Inn expansion has commenced and will add an additional 32 more rooms, bringing the total to 454 rooms, which will generate additional TOT revenue. There is reason to believe we will be well positioned for future revenue growth when the economy recovers during the next year. We have also seen other economic expansion, the opening of Napa Style in Bottega by Michael Chiarello at the V Marketplace. We've seen reinvestment by our existing commercial businesses with remodeling and updating properties, including Bouchon, Hurley's, Bistro Gentil Red, Gordon's Cafe and Wine Bar, and the recently approved Vita restaurant. We have now seen the adoption of a state budget in Sacramento. We need to be diligent to ensure that the state does not attempt to divert local government funding sources which have been used in the past to balance their budget problems on the backs of local government. Additionally, Town Council and staff are working with our legislators and the League of California Cities to ensure that any appropriate federal stimulus funding available that can be put to a meaningful use in Yountville comes to Yountville. We are hopeful to apply for financial assistance in several program areas, including modernization of the wastewater treatment plant, where funding could help to reduce potential ratepayer expenses and costs to our partner, the Veterans Home, street and road improvement projects, and bike path construction. These are current projects on the town's capital infrastructure program, which we have been working on that could be positioned to move forward if funding is made available. And with respect to our vision for character and quality of life in the community, in an effort to balance community concerns and business interests about the appropriate retail mix for the community, the council held a workshop on wine tasting rooms. Given the increasing interest in the opportunity to open wine tasting rooms in our community, we will need to have thoughtful discussion of how to address this interest so that we can use the economic engine of wine tasting to provide for increased retail diversity that we would otherwise not get in this town. The economic model for our community is wine country and culinary tourism. Wine tasting is a part of that experience, but we need to address how best to incorporate it into the fabric of the community in a way that is positive from both an economic and community viewpoint. The town continues to revamp and improve its communications efforts, both internally with the town's organizational structure and externally to our residents, business community, and regional community partners. You can expect to see continued refinement and update of the content available on the town's website. Our objective is to improve and increase content and include a search mechanism and document library. Continue to publish the town newsletter every 2 months, implementation of an email subscription service for town information, agendas, media releases, and periodic updates will become available. Town employee training and employee development workshops focus on developing and documenting organizational standard operating procedures and best management practices. Continue and increase media releases related to town activities and events, hold community workshop meetings on hot topic issues, and continue and increase business and community forums to discuss issues important to all Yountville business leaders and citizens and visitors alike. The town of Yountville is continuing to undergo organizational and operational changes at Town Hall. The council and town staff would like to thank Interim Finance Director Cindy Rosenberg and welcome new Finance Director Kathleen Bradbury, who will join our staff this month. Also, we are now planning for the subsequent changes associated with the upcoming retirements of Community Services Director Kenneth Leary and Public Works Director Mike Prawl. Additionally, the town will be issuing an RFP to various law firms for representation and to evaluate the delivery of legal services to the town. In conclusion, the town of Yountville remains fiscally sound and on track, respecting our adopted budget and the execution of the council's current objectives and goals. This council continues to represent the interests of the citizens of Yountville fairly and reasonably without imposing bias or hidden agendas. No matter how difficult the decision, each council member's opinion is well-reasoned and made in the best interests of Yountville. For that, I thank my fellow council members, town staff, the advisory boards and committees, our sheriff's department, and CAL FIRE and the citizens of Yountville for their dedication and hard work that makes our town so very special. As I mentioned to you earlier, readers of Sunset Magazine's March 2009 edition learned something that Yountville residents already know. Yountville was named one of the 20 best small towns in the West. Sunset editors searched the entire western United States for 20 of the best small towns that inspire dreams and maybe even moving plans. Each little town possesses a sense of connectedness you only find in places so small you cannot get lost in the crowd. Think of them as we-topias for their blend of self-reinvention and community. Not only is each in a breathtaking setting, but each of these 20 cities and towns also maintains that indefinable something else, call it heart, that makes you step onto a main street you've never seen before and say to yourself, I'm home. Thank you. Okay. Item 10, public hearing.
Mayor, I'm going to step down from this discussion for the reasons I've stated previous occasions when this item has come up.
Let the record reflect that Councilmember Chilton is stepping down for a perceived conflict of interest on this matter. Final master development plan review, Sorrento project. May we have staff report, please?
Thank you. This is a continued public hearing, or a continued item from the February 17th Town Council meeting for a final master development plan, including one use permit and design review for the development at 6488 Washington, which is the underdeveloped parcel south of, on the east side of Washington, south of Ranch Market, north of Piazza Quercia. And in this graphic up on the screen, at the bottom is runs Washington. The proposal, and since we've been through this before, I will briefly touch on the elements involved in the design review portion of this application and talk a little bit about the use permit for Building A. The proposal is to remove all of the existing building that is currently on site and all of the trees except for one fairly mature oak located approximately here on this site, southern property line of the site near the Piazza Quercia parking lot. In its place would be constructed two buildings. Building A is the larger building. It's a 1,840 square foot on the ground level building. It's a two-story building that also contains an upper level mezzanine as well as an apartment unit that is 605 square feet. Building B is detached. It's a one-story building. It is 727 square feet. Building A is 22 feet to the top plate with the overall height to the peak of 30 feet. And Building B is 16 feet. And then there's an additional 16-foot trellis on top of that, which covers a second-level roof terrace. Additionally, there is a tower that is at the back portion of this flat roof structure that will house mechanical equipment and goes to a height of 28 feet. These two buildings are separated by a 16-foot wide breezeway. First of all, they're set back from the front property line or back a sidewalk 15 feet, and then the 16-foot wide breezeway that opens onto a courtyard that's 620 square feet at the rear. Along the north portion, there is a 24-foot wide driveway, one half of which is located on the subject parcel, and the other half would be on the adjoining vacant parcel to the north. This accesses a 13-space parking lot at the rear of the site. It's separated from the courtyard and buildings by a wall with a gate opening, or a opening right here next to the handicap accessible parking space. The apartment has a designated parking space in this location adjacent to this refuse area that is located for its in the corner. It's remote from the buildings and the adjacent to the east residential unit, and also is near the refuse area for the Piazza Quercia development. There's a four-foot sidewalk for pedestrians from the street to the rear parking lot, in addition to access to the rear parking lot through the courtyard gate. Both of the upper levels are accessed by rear staircases that are open to the roof terrace here, and then to the apartment unit up above along the back east side of the building. The apartment has a 73-foot square foot landing at the entry at the top of the stairway that will serve as a portion of its open space, as well as 27 square feet of storage area under the staircase. The front will be, as well as the parking lot, will be landscaped, and there'll be container plantings within the courtyard. Now this gets into somewhat of the use of the building for primarily Building A. They have proposed a wine tasting use as well as some retail uses, and I'm going to let the applicant in their presentation expand on the retail offerings that they're going to have in there. We had previously discussed use of a coffee shop and perhaps pizza oven in the Building B. That has been withdrawn and will return at a later date for separate use permit consideration in Building B. So that's not part of the consideration tonight. This courtyard and front area, the 15-foot setback area, are intended to be usable open space to the public and will be open. One of the items of discussion in this 16-foot wide breezeway had a gate that was to be locked in the after hours when these buildings and businesses are closed. The applicant has removed the gate entirely from the project, as well as a rear gate onto the parking lot. So this will all remain open. They have requested consideration of a gate that would prevent access to the upper terrace, roof terrace on Building B after hours. I will comment that included in the staff report was a breakdown of this open space square footage, and the total is 28%, including the roof terrace with the gate closed, and while it is inaccessible, the total open area goes down to 23% of the total site. So there is a fairly substantial amount of open space, even without the roof terrace, that's in near compliance with the 25% standard. The idea is to leave this open to the public, and there'll be tables and chairs in the courtyard, as well as some in the front area and the front setback that would be available to the public. The wine tasting end of the business for Building A would amount to hours of operation. The applicant has requested that they be open 9 to midnight, 9 a.m. to midnight on Fridays and Saturday nights. However, in the conditions of approval, number 4 specifically, staff is recommending a 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, or every night actually, for the wine tasting use. And this is consistent with a couple of other wine tasting uses that have been approved recently, Girard and Verissimo. The outside deck or outside courtyard area would be open until dark, 9 a.m. to dark daily, and that's in consideration of the surrounding uses, including the residential area to the east. There will be no, on a routine basis, food preparation in the wine tasting, associated with the wine tasting business. However, during special events, they have requested catered food be brought in. They're proposing 24 special events divided into 20 minor and 4 major. The minor would be characterized by a limit of 15 to upper limit of 25 persons attending, while the major would be up to 50 persons attending, and those would be the 4-year major events. They have proposed for the major events that there will be a shuttle from the winery, Summerstone Winery. The guests would arrive in a shuttle. And for the other events, they would park on site except as needed, they would provide, in each case, a parking plan, and in those cases where it looks like they would need to make alternative arrangements, they would do so for remote parking and shuttle visitors to those events. There, in the staff report, one new section of the staff report is a discussion of open space and where else it has been applied and at what level it has been applied, what the language of the ordinance talks about it being all open space shall be visually accessible to the public, while most open space shall be physically accessible to the public. And then there's a discussion that follows of what visually accessible means. There's, in the language of the ordinance, not a lot of clarity of what that means. And the point is made that if it means all visible from the public way, then that in effect would increase the front setback, which is now 15 feet, to a greater distance. Staff points out that that may be to the detriment of the street scene, where the buildings closer to the pedestrian way is beneficial, and also pointing out that, in fact, the Villaggio Spa was granted a recesses where portions of that building were brought forward towards the sidewalk to as narrow a distance as 10 feet, and that project has come off pretty well. So they varied the setback on that building, while pushing it back further may not be what the effect we're really after. Notes exceptions to some other projects to the open space standard, most recent being Hotel Luca. A brief discussion of what's frequently cited as a successful use of this public open space concept, where it's shared and open to the public, as being the area between Bouchon and Bouchon Bakery, and that area right now is a little over 10%. So it's the actual amount of square footage devoted to this open space use appears to be the effectiveness of it is not necessarily related to the amount of it or its visibility. So I believe that covers pretty much the staff report. I should put the if I can find it here. That's not it. These are the elevations. You've seen these before and heard a presentation on them. There are a couple of little areas that I would like to note and suggest an additional condition of approval that I've discussed with the applicant, and it has to do with two AC units that the two areas in the back parking lot where they have wanted to put AC units. One of them is over here in this planter area, and another one is over in this area here. And we've talked about some alternatives, but haven't really nailed down the final resolution, and I would suggest a condition that would be worded to the effect that final location and screening of the AC units proposed for the planter areas in the parking area adjacent to the courtyard wall shall be to the approval of planning department staff. Also, I think you will, in the applicant's presentation, hear more an expanded description of the uses that will accompany the wine tasting use. And I would like to add a condition of approval that would incorporate those uses described by the applicant into the project description in addition to the wine tasting use, and make them part of the project itself. So they have to be present for the project to continue. And if they want to amend those, they would have to return for an amendment. If there's any questions I could answer, I would be happy to.
Council have questions for staff at this time?
I just have one thing I want to point out that Bob's talked about is there are, your conditions 6 and 7 do reflect and refer to the retail mixture in addition to wine tasting. And what Bob is talking about is incorporating some of the presentation from the applicant as appropriate. But there are 2 specific conditions in this use approval that would be what would be considered retail plus in an attempt to provide that structure.
Any questions for staff?
Mayor, before any questions, if I may, I'd like to disclose that I did meet with the applicant, members of the applicant's team, for them to present some of the changes that I suspect they will be presenting tonight before the public.
I too met with the applicant to discuss the changes that we insisted that they look at the last council meeting. So with that, if there are no other disclosures or comments.
Mayor, I just did have a brief phone call from Steve Anderson today, just in regards to if there was any questions I had on the changes they proposed.
Okay.
I'm very concerned about this. On December the 2nd, February the 17th, and again on March the 3rd, a quorum of the council has met with the applicant. And, the applicant absolutely has a financial, concern in this project. And I asked the last time, and I was not told even on December 2nd what these substantive, discussions were about. Tonight we heard a little information, but I'm just concerned that there's all these conversations with the quorum of the council and the applicant on 3 different occasions.
Yeah, the individual council members are well within their job duty to consult with applicants about jobs or about proposals that are before the council. The problem comes if there were a meeting, say, with 3 people together with the council, so that there would be discussions, and that's not what has been disclosed here. What's been disclosed here is individual contacts between the various members of the council and the applicants, and that is, in fact, part of council members and mayors' jobs, to meet with people who have applications before the council, to understand what the proposals are, and to discuss any questions that they may have. It's completely appropriate.
Well, on December 2nd, February 17th, it was just, I met with the applicant, I met with the applicant, I met with the applicant. I had no information.
Okay. It's not actually something that they are required to disclose. People meet with constituents all the time, and it's not necessary. They did that as, I guess, because they felt they wanted to make sure, in the interest of transparency, but it's not something that they are required to disclose.
And I would like to expand on what town council has said. At no time have we met as a group, nor have we discussed any of the items that we have discussed with this applicant or any other applicant that I personally have met with. There's been no deals brokered. There's been no decisions made outside of this hearing. So to say that there's been a quorum of meeting is not appropriate, because that's not what was happening.
What I meant by a quorum was that the applicant has met with 3 council members on 3 different occasions, and I did not have information about what these meetings were about. That's what I meant by a quorum.
Well, I could say that the meetings were nothing more about than what's in the packet that you read. So, there's no hidden agendas. It's just clarifications. And this is something, on the years I've been on the council, it's quite common between applicants and members, just as a time to explain things out a little thoroughly. Possibly it clarifies a lot of things and doesn't lead to meetings that last forever and ever and go on.
Okay. No more questions of staff? Does the applicant wish to make a presentation?
Stephen Henderson, 1894 Larkspur, applicant. Mayor, members of the council, first like to thank you for continuing the meeting and giving us the appropriate time to make the alterations to the project, and also meet with staff. We had a really good meeting with Steve Rogers, Sandra Smith, and Bob Tiernan today, and it's really good to at least have that feedback and give us the time, so I really appreciate that. And we'd also like to thank you as a project team, meeting with us individually to help us out. I think Councilmember Dutton put it well, so we don't have these meetings be a little bit lengthy, and it's really important for us to be vested in the community and make sure that the council, which I know it's your job to help protect and enhance the community, and we appreciate your feedback. And we met with you even prior to the submittal of the project because we needed to make sure that we were going down the right road. And again, we're here tonight to just make sure that we're enhancing that as well. We have Craig Becker here tonight, who is part of the overall project as far as developing it. He works with Summerston Wine Company. He's a winemaker and partner in the business, and we want him to present to you tonight as far as how the business is going to operate and the operations of the overall site. We also have project architect Bill Byland here tonight to answer any design questions. His associate Rob England is here as well. We also have Adam Green here, who's working on our Space B. I know it's kind of been it's been an issue as far as trying to nail down who's going to go in there, and that's where we feel it was in our best interest to relieve that use permit. My viewpoint, it's more giving kind of the power back to the town as far as to analyze that use, and we have this overall project that we're going for. We have a use permit on Building A, and then kind of there was this gray area on Building B. We could come up with hours of operation. The tenant that goes in there may want to have a certain floor plan. It's still our intent to do coffee shop and takeout pizza. And again, I know there's kind of gray area there, so we felt it was in our best interest to relieve that use permit. When we have the tenant signed up, which Mr. Green is working on with Craig and Alan, the property owners, we'll come back at that time, which we feel it'll be a good time to kind of have the council analyze that use as far as the operations that go on the site. And we also have Christoph Paddock, who is a resident here of the town, and he's a local artist, and that's kind of one of the other retail portions that we have in the wine shop. Again, I know the focus is on tasting. I understand, again, the potential impacts that the community sees. What we want to do is work with the town and the staff primarily. I know there was some conditions added in there to try to promote additional retail uses, and that's where Craig Becker will be able to touch on those as well. And we also have Christoph here to let you know about his art and the additional uses that we could have in the wine shop, not just wine tasting. And again, all along since we started at the concept, we always wanted to have the local art, and we wanted to have local books on history and vineyards and wineries as well. We've also, again, working with staff and knowing that this is something that the town wants, which is to get additional uses in there. There's a condition in there. We're going to formulate up as far as how to, present this correctly and work with staff on that as well, as far as the additional uses to enhance that retail portion other than just the tasting portion of the site. I think Bob really explained it well as far as removing the gates. We felt this was, again, we still kind of feel it's a security issue, potential liability issue, but at this point, we're going to come back to the council at the 6-month review. And if there is a problem, hopefully not, maybe the gates stay off. We felt that it was in our best interest just to eliminate those. We won't have a problem closing and opening them at night as well. So hopefully that makes the council feel more comfortable. It's kind of up in the air as far as the gate goes on the View Terrace. I know we had discussions as far as should we keep it or not. It looks like staff is suggesting to have a gate there. I kind of think would like to get feedback from the council regarding that as well. I think we could go either way without it. And again, there could be more liability too, at night primarily having it locked up. So getting feedback on that from you would be great. In regards to the condensers for the AC units, I did speak with Bob Kiernan today, and he had some really good alternatives as far as how we may be able to replace, especially that one area that's next to parking space A on the northern portion of the parking lot, and that's kind of an area that we could work with the staff on. And I also talked to Bill Byland, the project architect, and he said it's perfectly fine for us to kind of relocate that, and it's not a big deal to us at all to work with staff on that. Are there any questions in regards to the project at all? I think moved along pretty well here, and again, I really appreciate working with the town. I know Mike's helped us out, and again, Kenneth as well with the special events. Everybody's kind of been helping us out as far as trying to get the project moving along and helping us out as far as getting the feedback. One item is to present our hours of operation. We'd like to have the Friday and Saturday midnight hour of closing. We feel it would be a good resident serving use for potential employees that may get off work and have a nice atmosphere for them to do tastings. Craig Becker will elaborate on that as well. Again, we have a 10 o'clock consistency right now across the board. And again, I'll let Craig touch on that. We would like to, though, for special events, have the potential, though, to go to midnight. I know Masonry was allowed that for the special events. So if your request is to keep us at 10, we'd also like to stay consistent with them for the special events. And again, we'll have to submit for a special event permit, and we're working on a parking plan with the town that we have to submit prior to certificate of occupancy. At this time, again, thank you so much for your time, and I'd like to turn it over to Craig Becker for him to kind of present what's going on at the wine shop. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is Craig Becker. I'm the winemaker, general manager, and part owner of Summerston Wine Company. A little history on Summerston Wine Company. I merged my little wine business with Alan Chapman March 3rd of '08 and have been aggressively pursuing vineyard development and rebranding the vineyard and looking for an outlet to sell wine. So I'd like to address a little bit about who we are and the concerns of the council and the public, and provide a little clarity to the project tonight. Summerston Wine Company is a ranch, a vineyard, and a winery. We have a 1,700-acre ranch off Sage Canyon Road. It comprises 2 valleys, and it's a really beautiful place. It's a special place. It's one of the largest, not the largest, but one of the largest continuous ranches in Napa. We have 800 sheep on the ranch that we use for fire suppression, and currently have about 500 baby lambs. The sheep have been busy. The additional things to the ranch, aside from the vineyard, is the recreational activities. We, as part of our marketing plan for the winery and entertainment, plan to do guided mountain biking tours, horseback riding, and hiking. It's about 7 miles from the Silverado Trail on Sage Canyon Road. And so it's a bit of a ways out there, but when you get there, it's a special place, and we intend to show it off as best we can in a natural, functioning way. The vineyards are roughly 280 acres of vineyards planted. We have hillsides, valleys, and everything in between under vine. So it's a small fraction of the overall property under vineyard production right now. We grow Bordeaux, Rhone varietals, and some eclectic Barbera, Petit Syrah, Grenache Blanc, and other fun stuff as well. We sell wine, grapes to Duckhorn, Hall, David Ramey, Bialy, Heidi Barrett, Warren Swift, and ourselves. So we have a nice lineup of top quality wine producers. The winery is comprised of 3 brands. The Summerston brand, which is our pinnacle Cabernet Bordeaux brand. The Priest Ranch brand. We're bringing back an old Napa Valley Priest Ranch that was started in the mid-'60s and kind of fell out of production in the mid-'90s. So we've got a mid-tier brand that sells Cabernet, Petit Syrah, and Zinfandel. And the third brand, which is sort of an eclectic fun brand, is called High Flyer. I'm a pilot, and I tend to fly to different vineyards to visit with clients in California. And we source fruit from Napa Valley and Sonoma County for that brand. Let's see. So, what I wanted to explain is how does this relate to the Sorrento building? What we feel we put together with the project is a really unique mix of multi-use. Building A, we have residential, we have office building, office space, and a retail wine shop. And the adjacent Building B, we've been calling it Building B for a long time. Our intention is to get a local serving business in there just because we'd like one too. We think it'd be a compatible business with ours. But for various reasons, we've decided to move that off until we have a defined tenant so we can really present you a legitimate quality plan for the council to evaluate. So with Building A, we really want to emphasize the mixed use of Building A. It is a wine shop where you can buy bottles, you can buy glasses of wine, but we're also going to be selling things like our ranch. The activities that we have at the ranch, we intend to sign people up at the wine shop. Residents of Yountville will get a discount on all activities because they live in Yountville. And those do include the mountain biking, horseback riding, hiking, and other events that we have out at the ranch. We intend to allow the public to sign up and purchase lamb that is from Napa Valley. It will not be available at the shop, obviously, but it will be delivered to their house. We have a mail order program we're developing. So right now, we are currently the only ones growing a sizable crop of lamb in Napa Valley, so some local produced lamb. Other items we intend to sell at the retail shop include art. Christopher Paddock is the artist of our high flyer labels. He has a bunch of other art that we intend to show, initially be showing our labels, and other local artists that we find compatible with what we're doing. Books from all various kinds of books, local authors, books on Napa Valley, the history of Napa Valley, the wine business, the geography. Really, how did we get to where we are as Napa Valley? There's a lot of information that we would like to become a source for that you wouldn't necessarily find at larger bookstores. One of the last things we really intend to promote is locally made products. We are a member of Slow Food. We believe in sourcing food locally, enjoying local products. I just built a house in St. Helena, and everybody that helped us on the house is from Napa Valley. We intend to employ those same kind of practices in building this building. And the last thing is that we see that this is an environment that I would like to hang out in, that's comfortable, relaxed, that we would like the community to feel that it's a place to come and meet friends, make new friends. And it's not necessarily a lounge, but it's something that you can sit and relax. You're not going to be hounded, buy another glass, buy another glass. It's a place that we think will become a fun place for the community, which is why we'd like it to stay open those 2 extra hours on Friday and Saturday nights so that we can hit the local crowd after they finish with ponchos. Some of our membership that we belong to is Napa Valley Vintners, Slow Food, Napa County Farm Bureau, and American Society of Viticulture and Enology. And one of the sort of creeds that we're following at Summerston Wine Company is be sustainable, eat locally, buy locally, employ locals, and drink good wine. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
When will those lambs be ready?
Well, we're not sure if we're going to be able to show it at the Napa Valley Wine Auction, but April will be the first harvest. And that's the term, we're just sort of learning the lingo with the lamb business. So basically the lambs will be processed in Dixon, that's the West Coast hub of lamb processing, and they'll be delivered here in Napa Valley. So we're working with some restaurants, markets that will carry our lamb.
Wonderful, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I do.
No.
Council Vice Mayor?
And I want to bring up a clarification issue, and Bob, please add your comments as needed, but condition number 9, the conditions of use, talk about the wine tasting and the ability, or prohibition actually, of individual glasses and bottles of wine for consumption on site. So, and there sounds like there's a bit of misunderstanding about that. Bob, do you want to comment on that? I mean, my understanding is this was the condition, but Mr. Becker, you're certainly talking about something a little different than that, having that ability on site.
Yes, that is something that we put as a condition, and I believe discussed in an oral staff report at an earlier meeting about the law does allow a more liberal in the wine tasting rooms, use of, or types of products sold, including glasses of wine, bottles of wine, and that we were restricting this because their request was for a wine tasting room, and I thought we were clear on that, and apparently it's going to something a little different here. My understanding of the project description, what is wine tasting, and meaning a portion that's under the ABC of an ounce is a tasting, and that was it.
Right, but Mr. Becker, it sounds like it's clear that you're proposing that it be individual glass and bottle consumption on site as well. That's your intent.
I think we'd like to keep that as an option.
Well, we have to settle that condition. It'll either be allowed or prohibited according to this, if we go to the point of addressing this particular set of conditions. So maybe you can comment if that's not an option, how do you feel about your application? I mean, do you want to move forward with it or not? Because if it's limited to wine tasting, because this goes to an issue I was going to have later on about the use of the courtyard, and if this is just wine tasting at a couple ounces at a time, how would the courtyard be used for wine tasting? So maybe you can comment on whether this is a deal breaker for you or not, because we need to, this is kind of a core use for you, along with all the other mixed uses that you're proposing. So,
Well, I mean, if we weren't able to pour a glass of wine, we probably would need to stay open past 10. That'd be my first comment. I think I'd like to talk to Steve about that. I wasn't aware of that.
I was just reminded that at an earlier hearing, David had stated they did not want to have a wine bar and did not intend to pour by the glass or sell glasses of wine. So that was our understanding of what the project consisted of.
Yeah, I think there just needs to be a clarification. It's a tasting room. There are going to be under an ounce tastings, and if it's something that Craig would like to formulate, with Alan and his the property ownership of the business as well, that's something that we could revisit with the council later on. At this point, it is true, David did state at an earlier meeting that it'll just be tastings and under an ounce. And I see your concern as well, John, Vice Mayor, that if there's a full glass, people could be walking around, and again, it's more flights of wines in the tastings, and again, poured at the portions of what ABC regulates at, which is under an ounce. And then again, if there's something that we want to go past that later on, we'll revisit that at the 6-month review, or we'll come back in for a use permit amendment. But at this time, we're looking at the tasting portion, and again, there will be the retail sales of the full bottles of wine, but no opening on site.
I personally would like to hear council comment on this, and maybe we can wait until the entire presentation is over, but I'd like to hear, because certainly up until this presentation, all indications to me have been that it's wine tasting. And so we can have that discussion if necessary, if that's the conditional use you want, but that's the first time that we've heard that that's the condition.
Yeah, me too. We're proposing the tasting portion. We're not going forward with the full glasses right now. Maybe it's just Craig was maybe looking at the overall portion of having the glasses, but they won't be in the flights and not over the ounces per ABC's regulations on the tasting rooms. We're not intending to have a bar, and that's the main thing to present to the council here, is that it's not going to be a bar. Single source from the winery. Again, multiple labels, all from Summerston. And again, no full glasses, tasting room. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I would point out that is the way the condition is written.
And if I may review the hours that have been applied to 3 of the wine tasting rooms that have recently been approved. Gerard and Verismo have daily hours from 10 a.m. to 6, with special events that can go to 10 p.m. Masonry, they had requested the midnight, but they were held to hours of 9 a.m. to 10, and then their outdoor hours would be 9 a.m. to dark, which is exactly what is being suggested as a condition here. And that's out of their resolution of approval.
Council, have any more questions for Mr. Becker?
So what are the hours of operation?
They have requested hours to midnight on weekends and 2 days of the weekend. And in the condition 4 of the resolution, we have remained consistent with what's been applied at Masonry, which is 9 to 10, and then 9 to dark for outdoors.
So for clarity, I made a mistake. We are tasting wine. It was a misunderstanding.
Thank you.
Not to stop the dialogue, we had Christoph Paddock. Is it okay for him to speak now, so we're done with our presentation?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, missing council members. I kind of feel like a lot of this has kind of hinged on me, a little bit my fault. When we started this project, they approached me almost a year ago to work on some labels for the wines, and David Zarowski and Craig Becker I had known for a while. It was going to be High Flyer Wine and I think 3 other labels with 3 different names. And after we had our initial discussions on layout and colors and schemes and whatnot, it became High Flyer Wines completely. So I wound up doing 4 labels for them. And in the time of these endless meetings that we went through, because I'm not used to doing commissioned artworks, I like to just do my own thing and throw them out there. What are we, about 8 different restaurants over a 4-month period? Yeah. They kind of fell in love with Yountville. So I think that's pretty much why we're actually here today, that they actually really liked the feeling of the community here. I do work for an opposing winery as well. I don't feel like there's any real competition between wineries. You're just competing with yourself on a regular basis. So I'm just here to say that I'm really excited about this project and these guys and how much of a pleasure it's been to be working with them throughout this whole project. So thank you.
Thank you. Does council need to hear from any of the other representatives of the applicant?
I think so.
Well, since new information has been introduced, I will reopen the public hearing. So if there is anyone from the public that would like to comment on the material that's been presented tonight, you're certainly welcome to do so.
Tim Bringman, and I might have missed it. I have a question, a couple of comments. Is this when the public hearing has been opened? Is this?
I'm reopening the public comment period.
Well, the public hearing.
This is a public hearing.
But at the beginning, I have a specific question. I might have missed this, but at the beginning of the presentation from the staff, all I heard you say was, let's have the staff report. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the public hearing wasn't officially opened in any way. Anyway, I'll start with my presentation. I believe that the Brown Act is being violated for 2 reasons. Number 1, Agenda Item 10 was not properly posted as required by the Brown Act. The agenda for March 3rd, as posted on Friday, February 27th, Item 10 begins with public hearing closed. And for emphasis, it's repeated at the end, public hearing closed entirely in red capital letters. If the public hearing is indeed closed for item 10, the council may continue their discussion from February 17th and vote on it. But further testimony and information from the applicant cannot be considered. Unfortunately, additional information from the applicant has already been presented to the council. It would be difficult to expect that it would be ignored. Only the original resolution from February 17th can be voted upon. This is analogous to a jury trial. The prosecution and defense rested their case on February 17th. The public hearing was closed. Now the decision is in the jury's, or in this case, the council's hands. One side, the applicant in this case, can't continue to argue the case, while the other side, the public, is thinking that the jury is simply deliberating and is left unprepared to respond to the applicant's new arguments. If the public hearing is now open and not closed as listed on the agenda, then the open public hearing was not posted properly as an agenda item for tonight's meeting and therefore cannot be discussed. And the second reason is the public has not been given adequate opportunity for public comment on this item. When the agenda for March 3rd was posted on Friday, February 2nd or 27th, it stated that the public hearing was closed. Interested citizens wishing to voice their opinions regarding this project would certainly assume that the public testimony is over. All the facts and information have presented and no further public comment would be heard. A reasonable person would assume that the next phase to be continued on March 3rd was discussion and voting by the council. Since the February 17th council meeting, the applicant has had the opportunity to work with staff to write a new staff report and resolution. The agenda for tonight's March 3rd meeting listed a closed public hearing, not a reopened public hearing, not a continuance of the public hearing, with a new staff report and a new resolution to consider. Any citizens that relied on the agenda having no way to know that the public hearing would be reopened with a new staff report and a new resolution to be considered have been denied the opportunity to study the changes and prepare a statement for public comment. Declaring the public hearing reopened and soliciting public comment now is not a sufficient remedy. I have a comment for the attorney. The public hearing is intended to be public. Although not illegal, private negotiations and discussions with the applicant so that the council member has likely made up their mind prior to the vote is absolutely unethical.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Carol Franks, 6600 Yount, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. I was one of the people who figured we couldn't participate tonight. I'm glad that you're saying that we have a chance to participate. As just one person who lives in town, I'm really glad that you're talking about a 10 o'clock cutoff that's consistent with the other tasting rooms, just because there are people who have to get up in the morning. I mean, I don't live close enough to really worry about it one way or the other. And I love the idea of local artists being featured. It's something different that we've got. There are some local artists in the gallery up in 1870 upstairs, but not particularly Yountville artists. I like that idea a lot. I was concerned about the gate, only because when kids get out of, I'm not old enough to forget that when kids leave the community hall at whatever time that's going to close, if there's an open rooftop garden, it would be very tempting to go up there and hang out and do stuff that young people do on roofs when they have access to it. I guess personally, again, I don't live that close to it, but I would just, it seems prudent, even though there's a cop shop around the corner, they shouldn't have to be worrying about dealing with what goes on a roof. I guess I'm old and biased about that. Otherwise, I feel much better about the fact that the applicant is saying that they need to come back with a better plan, with a more thought-through plan, and a plan that we can actually understand what the goals, what would be happening in that store. I think it's a wonderful idea to combine retail. I like the mixed use, but I really like the idea of coming back with something that we can look at. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Mr. Anglin?
Good evening. Rob Anglin, 1067 Darms Lane, Napa, and soon to be 1891 Mulberry Street, Yountville. I'm speaking as a former resident and future resident of Yountville, and not as part of the presentation of the applicant, although all of you probably know that I work for Valley Architects. I'm really speaking more about my thoughts about the town and about the building and the wine business. As the mayor said in her presentation, she talked about the latest issue of Sunset Magazine, and it listed the 20 best small towns in the West, and it said from seaside paradise to a food lover's haven. And within the section called Food and Wine Haven, Yountville was one of the 5 towns that were chosen. And Yountville was chosen because of its, position as a destination for food and wine. Right now, that is what draws people to our town. We've all, for many years, tried to bring in locally serving businesses. It says it in the ordinances, but we're too small a town. One of the things that I wanted to point out was that buildings far outlive the uses that they're built for. And there are many evidences in town. Gordon's used to be a grocery store. The French Laundry was a house, a residence. Bouchon was a bank. Bouchon Bakery was a hair salon before it became the bakery. Ad Hoc was the bus station. Vintage 1870, V Marketplace as it is now, was a winery. So my point is that buildings far outlive the uses that they're built for. And the town, the living organism, what a town is and what the needs are, fills those spaces with what is required at that time. And right now, wine tasting rooms and associated uses are what is bringing people to the town. That's not to say within 5, 10, or 20 years that these buildings will be totally used for something else that will provide a need for maybe us locally, but for maybe the region too. So you need to keep that in, we all need to keep that in mind. And so it was really very comforting for me to hear the mayor's presentation about the state of the town, in the sense that the town is responding to people's concerns about wine tasting rooms. There's a lot of wine tasting rooms because there's a lot of interest in that use. And the town is having forums for people to discuss the issue. There's a lot of conditioning that's associated with that. And so I really trust the town is doing a very responsible role in serving the people locally. And the idea that local serving uses are being brought into that overall use of wine tasting rooms, I think is very good. The other part about it is that the building that's on the site right now is certainly underutilized and certainly couldn't be a part of what really has always been, in my mind, the only remaining retail core that we have. And I think that this project really is a better serving use for that. I think that the streetscape, the line of the street that begins at Piazza Quercia is kept by these 2 buildings. The idea that there's going to be a public space, and truly a public space. I mean, I would go in there and sit by the fountain, just on an evening walk or something like that. So as a local, that's attractive to me. So I think that the buildings are a real addition to the town and are kind of continuing that kind of retail core that we have right in that location. So I think that overall the town is certainly responding in a responsible way about wine tasting rooms, conditioning the project appropriately, and the idea that these buildings would certainly be an addition and not a detraction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. Anyone else? All right, seeing no further comment on this matter, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council for further discussion and or a decision. Councilmember Dutton?
Well, I just want to thank the applicant again for listening to some of the concerns and coming back with what you have. I would just like to address a couple of things. One, and Vice Mayor Dunbar brought up, strictly wine tasting. I don't think there was ever an issue that it was anything but that, which would lead to, and I think the gentleman did say, well, in that case, that would be a 10 o'clock closing. I think the hours being consistent is fine there. As far as the open space, and when you read it through it quite a bit, and I guess for one, I don't know where we got hoodwinked in a sense on Luco down at 16%, but apparently it did. But in any event, I think as you look at the graph that Bob put out there at 23%, and then when the terrace is open, 28%, I think that more than qualifies. I do agree, though, that to me, that gate should be closed. And I will stand by that. I would not want to demand that it be open and then find out, sometime, as Carol Fink said, that some kids got up there and horsing around, and as God knows what could happen. If they want to climb over it and all that, well, that's their problem to get in there. But I don't think if somebody is not there on site, that gate should be open, that terrace should be closed, and that does leave plenty of space out there. As Mr. Anglin just said, I do think that whole area right in there is a very friendly sidewalk atmosphere type of thing. They're going to leave the tables open. I would see a lot of public use, I think, on that particular space, similar to what you see at Bouchon's and what have you. So other than that, in looking through it, I feel everything's met. I know the 100 feet for the apartment. I feel comfortable at the 73 and the 27 for the storage. If that was me, I'd like to have some closed storage that I could use. Permeable paving, that was an issue. I know Bob didn't bring it up, as I understand that one of the conditions, and I agree, no more runoff than we have right now is certainly fine. And the lighting issues seem to be resolved with the lowering of those lights in the backyard. And again, with the mixture, the use in the wine tasting there with the local art books and that type of thing, I think brings a lot to the project.
Thank you for your comments. Councilmember Mueller?
Yeah, I have some comments. I'm very concerned that, our ADA accessible people cannot get up to this roof garden. I mean, I just don't think that is fair to them. It's not something that I can really agree to. And the applicant also has pointed out in a couple places that there are safety and security issues with the open courtyard, which we're going to have. And they're saying, hey, when it happens, we're going to come back. I'm concerned about that as well. I mean, we can't just let that go. In terms of the open space, I'm still confused here. I mean, I see front yard, breezeway, and courtyard, 18%. Parking lot planters, I mean, that was absurd. I just can't imagine that you could count a pot full of petunias as some kind of an open space. So I only see 18% open space here, which I don't think is adequate. Maybe we made a mistake before with Hotel Luca, but I, don't think we should make that again. Again, retail space, sales we're doing, I think we're just trying to make something up here. It just doesn't really seem like this is really retail in terms of what we're really trying to achieve here. Hours of operation, again, if a coffee shop comes in, you've got this apartment up there. And, special events, if they're open till midnight and coffee shop open to 6, I mean, we've, talked about the person in the apartment, it's like renter beware. I don't think that's a good way to really deal with that situation either. We really do have a residential person up here. We have to consider all of this together because that's what we have in our zoning. So I really don't like having these late hours and then a coffee shop where it's going to be open early. I mean, this guy or woman up there is going to be a problem. Also, it does state in recital number 3 that the town council duly noticed a public hearing on March 3rd. I'm still very confused about all this. It looks like we closed it and then we opened it. I think this wording needs to be worked on. Also, we received a citizen petition on February 17th. We've had other applicants come. I'm listening to the citizens. They do not want additional wine tasting rooms, and I cannot draw the conclusion in the general use findings from item 1 that the proposed use is compatible with the community. I mean, based on the community saying they don't want this, I can't see that. I cannot agree with that one at all. Also, it says that the proposed use of wine in retail is a desirable combination to draw residents and was contemplated by the RSC zoning. I went through the zoning word by word, and I do not see that in there at all. So, also, on item number 3 in the resolution is not correct. It says the wine tasting retail is consistent with the general plan in that this use serves the residents. That should be stricken too. I just don't agree with that. I mean, there are several things where the very specific wording in terms of our zoning has been left out. That uses are encouraged would serve the daily needs of the residents at all primary commercial in nature, including bakeries, food store, variety shop services, professional offices, or others deemed similar by the council. It also says that new restaurants and other businesses that rely principally on visitors shall not be permitted. Now, if we want to make exceptions to all these and put that in there, that is the prerogative of the council. But to pretend like we're doing this when we're really not, I take great exception to that, because we're adding stuff in here about the interpretation of all this and really ignoring very specific wording that, whether we like our zoning or not, is what we've got. So if you want to put something together that says, we want this and it's an exception, 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 and approve it, that seems reasonable to me, but not what we're doing.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused by Councilmember Moeller's interpretation of whether this is a local serving business or not.
I never use those words, just to be clear.
Her husband, Mr. Bringman, at a previous meeting, got up and read a prepared statement specifically calling out a neighboring wine shop as clearly local serving, which has less mixed use than this proposal. So I don't think that there's consistency in interpretation of what is considered local serving or appropriate use in town. Specific to this application, there are several points that I need to comment on. One of them, the terrace gate concept. I welcome the fact that the main gate, if you call it that, on Washington Street has been removed. I support the removal of that in order to allow the open space to actually be accessed either visually or physically by the public. I support, for security reasons, closing off that rooftop terrace either at the base or at the top of the stairway with some type of gate to at least discourage, if not prohibit, after-hours access. When you close off that terrace, it does have an impact on the open space, and discussions with town staff, I'm satisfied with the 28% open space that's being proposed. One thing that's easy to forget is the open space that's in the front facing Washington Street. And we can't ignore that fact. It's just the fact that it's right up front doesn't mean that it isn't part of the project and part of open space. The fact that the majority of the time, basically everything but overnight, they're meeting or exceeding their minimum open space requirement, I'm satisfied that issue has been addressed. The ADA accessibility issue, I feel, has been addressed also with further discussions about the continued accessibility of the courtyard. And with that being an equivalent accommodation, I'm satisfied that although the terrace rooftop will not be ADA accessible, as stated as a requirement, there needs to be a comparable or equivalent accommodation, and I believe the courtyard satisfies that. I welcome the mixed use that's being proposed in the Building A. I think it's exactly the kind of mixture we're talking about. We're talking about not only non-wine tasting, but we're talking about local artists. We're talking about promoting our strength, which is the wine country. I don't think there's any reason to shy away from that fact. A couple other clarifications, though, about the conditions of use. Clearly, the biggest one that Councilmember Dutton already touched on, and I agree with him on, is we've been talking all along about this being a tasting facility, not a wine bar. That's a whole different application that, or at least condition of use that the applicant is welcome to address at another time, but that's not what we're proposing here. So clearly, it's limited to tasting and all the restrictions that go along with that. That includes no table service for food or the courtyard. Special events, I think it's already been touched on, but I wanted to mention it again, that any special events require a special permit, so we can make sure that sufficient parking issues have been addressed, and that we're aware of the volume of guests. Let's see if I had any other comments. Oh, the hours of operation. In my discussions with the applicants, the comment that I heard from them was they were proposing basically what was fair and what was equivalent to what else was happening in town, which staff has pointed out as 10 p.m. And it sounds like the applicants even agree to that now that the use issue has been clarified. So I would support, as presented by staff, the 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. inside and 9 a.m. to dark outside, because there still is that light and noise concern for the adjacent residents. I also like the efforts, though not really part of this application, to really reach out to the locals, Lamb fans or not, with discounts and just with a variety of opportunities to engage our locals as well as any visitors or special guests that you have. And I want to reiterate that personally I take offense from Mr. Bringman's comments that and his wife, Councilmember Moeller, that alluded to a potential inappropriate meeting or meetings by myself or members of the council. By making that statement and grandstanding like that, I feel like that's attacked my integrity and the council's integrity. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't appreciate it. And I will continue to act with integrity and within my legal obligations to be informed and educated by the applicants prior to these meetings. I will continue to inform our community when those meetings happen. So I just wanted to go on record that I think it was inappropriate for those comments. I don't feel like either the mayor or Councilmember Dutton has ever stepped outside their appropriate action. So, and I didn't appreciate the inference that I did either.
Thank you for your comments, and I would tend to concur with your last comments about the violation of the Brown Act and any ethical conditions imposed upon the council. As I stated in my State of the Town address, I believe that this council makes their decisions based on factual information, and those decisions come without bias or hidden agendas, and they are made to represent the community of Yountville and not any single individual or agenda. With that, I will address the issues that are before us this evening. We asked the applicant to go back and look at the issue of open space and what constitutes open space, as well as to address the conditions on the use permit. The applicant has done that, and I appreciate meeting with you to discuss those items, and I also appreciate your addressing them. I agree that the opening of the courtyard makes it a nice, inviting environment and really kind of exemplifies the open-spaced aspect of the project. Overall, it's a beautiful project, and I appreciate your taking the gates down. As far as the rooftop terrace, as I told you when we met, I felt that there would be a security problem with that, and I would support the gating off of the rooftop terrace after hours. And speaking of hours, I do concur with the staff's recommendations that daily use shall be 9 a.m. or whenever, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. You do have a resident upstairs, and I don't think he would appreciate some rockin' parties going on until midnight, and neither would the surrounding neighbors. So hours should be at from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily, and 9 a.m. to dark for outdoor activities. And I do also notice that the conditions of approval say that no wine service will take place outdoors unless you do request a special event permit. So with that, I think I can support the applicant's application, and if there's no further discussion or comment, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move for approval of resolution number 2755-09, approving the final master development plan for the Sorrento project. And I think, Bob, you said including the air conditioning units. I think we've already mentioned that the uses of the items included in the sale of that shop were already in the conditions. The commercial building and wine tasting and retail use is located at 6488 Washington Street.
And before I make a second, I'd just like to clarify that that it's clear in here that we are talking about the conditions of Building A only, because we're talking about the development plan for the commercial buildings, plural. Do we need to say singular or?
Design review applies to both buildings, and the use permit would apply only to Building A. They as proposed and expanded on at the meeting tonight.
Just want to make that point of clarification, and I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
That motion carries. Thank you to the applicant. Item 11, Town Council Goals and Objectives for fiscal year 2009-2010, continued from the February council meeting. May we have staff report, please? Welcome back, Councilmember Chilton.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Briefly, this item identifies the outcome of the 1.5-day goal and objective workshop that the council recently held on January 29th and 30th. During that workshop, the council reached consensus on 5 goals that will be identified as our working parameters for fiscal year 2009-11. They include maintain the town's fiscal soundness through the current economic crisis and beyond, maintain and enhance the town's public facilities and infrastructure, develop and implement a business plan for the community center, improve two-way communication between town government and the community, and update our vision for character and quality of life in the community. I also direct your attention to the attached goal-setting priority meeting workshop notes, and during that, on pages 4 and 5, are some feedback from the council with regard, you referred to as staff guidance. And those are some of the points that we will be working on. And one of the elements that we also discussed were quarterly updates as to our progress. And one of the elements that we also discussed in that workshop that will be coming forward were some policy update planning discussions. And some of those were an attempt to have some type of a study workshop session on what do we want, what are our tools that we need, and how do we potentially change some of the existing tools if they're not accomplishing what we want. So the action item before you tonight is simply a adoption of the resolution adopting the outcome. We will also update the website and relevant information with your current goals, and we will begin working with the budget process to incorporate those and the staff guidance that you gave during the workshop. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for staff at this time? Councilmember Chilton?
Steve, I want to ask a quick question on page 5. The policy statement development plan, number 1, et cetera. Do you have a feel for some time frames? One of the reasons I'm asking that is I recall in that discussion, and I can speak for myself, of saying that there were some ideas that individual council members had that they wanted to give input before it was brought back. What's the time frame on some of these items?
I think that's still being evolved, in all honesty. Our hope is to do something on a late spring time frame. So I think if there's council input, what would be really helpful is if we have some ideas, and we could also welcome input from the community, part of the framework on this study session is really to focus a little bit more on what do we want, rather than always trying to focus on, we don't want this, we don't want this, this isn't working. But let's do a thoughtful discussion, and then go back and look at our rules. You know, for example, if we're having problems with our definitions in our land use and zoning ordinance, let's address that.
Right.
If there's some things that no longer work as well, let's look at that. And I think there's consensus amongst all 5 of you that that's a good discussion. And what I want to do also is have us get out of the box a little bit by thinking forward, which is, and you all do this really well, which is visioning, what would we like? And then figure out what do we need to do to accomplish that, rather than trying to figure out our interpretation of something that was written 20 and 25 years ago. That's the intent, and clearly any input from the council will be helpful, because I would envision a community workshop where we talk about things. I mean, a good illustration that Bob mentioned that's just ironic, and that is, you know, Bouchon has, you know, an area that's very well known by everybody. It has a 10% open space element when you define that. And what are we really trying to achieve with open space? What do we want by open space? What does FAR mean? You know, and if they're not meeting what we want, let's look at different tools that will help us get there. And I think that may help us move forward as a community with some of those issues. And more importantly, we can work on addressing some interim policy guidance to staff, applicants, and the community while we're going through the general plan update.
So May, probably the first one, if we're looking at April or May.
I mean, we've got a few little
I don't need to
things.
get it to you
Yes,
next week.
That's why I want to work with the
That's
council.
my question.
Because this is going to be an additional meeting. This is not going to, you know,
For
based
these,
on.
for these 4 or 5 items?
Right. I mean, this will be a one workshop.
Okay.
And I'm anticipating, based on your earlier feedback, that we have to do a few of these things outside of the normal council meeting in order to have a good, you know, the council works better on this type of stuff when you're not in a formal meeting structure.
Okay.
And we also have to start thinking about some of our budget workshops and hearings. So part of what I really need a little help from you all is how much time are you all available, and where do we start putting that all together?
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a
Councilmember Moeller?
question. General plan, I mean, well, I have a procedural question in terms of, are you going to link each one of these kind of subtasks that we really aren't fleshed out under the goals? Because I know these were just kind of thrown out a little bit, and they weren't, they were only meant to kind of give you some thought of where you were going to go. How do we really, are we going to link those to the goals or unlink those to the goals? And especially, for example, under quality of life, which has to do with the 5th goal, we have general plan. I mean, right now, I can assure you, you'll never meet that goal in a year, and you know that too.
Well,
So how do we
let's point out
differentiate
right,
that?
Part of these things, and that's why we also talk about these being rolling 2-year. The general plan process will probably actually be in a 2.5-year. So when we talk about general plan, I think that's fair. We need to start saying, when do we start? What are the elements? What are the various decision points? And we can start fleshing out more detail. Some of this is somewhat dependent on, one, getting all of the management team assembled and divvying out some of the structural elements. But things like, you know, sitting down and having some discussion about urgent land use, community-wide vision, are all things that can be done more in the interim, and to help us put policy guidance while we're going through that. So with the council's indulgence, what we're going to work on is trying to add some detail to these and trying to put timelines. And I don't have a perfect presentation for you on exactly what each one of these elements will fully involve. I know that I'm not giving up on our focus on coming up with a 10-year financial plan that we talked about last year, and that's certainly one of the things that Kathleen will be addressing in her new role. But we may also be focusing on some more mundane things like user fee review and cost recovery and some of those things that we may have to prioritize. And those are some of the work discussions that I will bring to the council and say, we'd like to do all of these. I'm going to recommend doing A, B, and C first while we're working to support these overall goals.
So will these be linked, these pieces that we have under each one of these goals, or what are we approving exactly?
You're approving the 5 primary goals with the understanding that what you've asked me to do under staff, The goals are the 5 goals that were identified. That's what you're adopting. And then the minutes are there to reflect that staff is working on bringing these things that you said you believe need to be incorporated under these goals. So as we bring the linkage, detail, whatever you want to call that, we will be working on that, and I hope to incorporate that actually into part of our budget process. Therefore, we can say, you know, here's what we're going to be doing with the general plan, here's how it's going to work in our annual work plan, here's the budget consequence. Urgent land use issues, all right, maybe that's not quite as budget driven, but it will be in the sense that the planning and building staff will have to allocate that. Will there be things that go to the zoning design review board? We'll start mapping that out. You know, affordable living was a component that the council threw in, saying, how do we address community concerns? And affordable living is very broad. It could be housing, it could be services. So, I mean, there's some things that I need help from the council as we're preparing what exactly do you want some of these. But the action tonight is only the adoption of the 5 goals, which are maintain the town's fiscal soundness through the current economic crisis and beyond, maintain and enhance the town's public facilities and infrastructure, develop and implement a business plan for the community center, improve two-way communication between town government and the community, update our vision for character and quality of life. And then under those are things that are generally an understanding from the council. How I'm taking that is those are the types of things that at this point you're saying to the staff need to be fleshed out and incorporated more into those goals. Whether we call that linkage yet or a detail, I've got to work on that for you.
Well, then the only change I'd like to see is in the last one, instead of update our vision, is the town-wide shared vision, because I'm not certain if we don't do, I mean, is our intent here that this is just the town council vision? Or it didn't give me enough?
We spent a lot of time on that discussion, and what I would say is what you're adopting right now is the council's vision. And you had a lot of discussion in there about the fact that you wanted to do a community-wide vision, and those are two different things. So I think part of that comes into the discussion on the general plan, where we've talked about some type of, you know, several types of survey instruments. So I definitely think that will be in there. But, you know, this is your wording that you came out of from the your consensus discussion, and I don't have liberty to change the council's consensus direction. So, I mean, if you want that to be update community vision, but it says update our vision, and I would insert council. But that's your prerogative as a council if you want to make a change in that.
Well, that would be my recommendation, that we update the town-wide shared vision, because I'd like to be inclusive.
But if I may, Mayor, we did go over this at great length at our goal setting, and this is, as it says in the title, this is the council's goal setting. This is in no way representative, just like none of the other goals here are representative of a community-wide outreach, which is going to happen and has happened, will continue to happen. This is specifically something that will be used as a tool for all of us when we go to the budget discussions and remind ourselves of what are the priorities we discussed at great length over a day and a half for our direction. That in no way limits our ability to reach out to the community and get their feedback as we move forward. But this is specifically what we put down as our goals. So I would be more than happy to move forward with this resolution as it's written. To that effect, I'll move that we adopt resolution number 2758-09, establishing town council goals and objectives for 2009-2010.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Thank you. Item 12, budget review discussions, continued from the February 17th meeting. Do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As was alluded to earlier, we have at a staff level, and the council's directed staff to look at what a potential reduction in our budget and also kind of guidelines for where we might begin next year's budget. The town has budgeted an estimated 3.5 million in TOT revenue. To date, we have received 1,869,000, or approximately 53% of the budgeted TOT revenue. There's two factors going on right now. One is we have experienced, well, let me back up. First, we're slightly ahead of projections at the 6-month point. Within that projection, we saw the first overall net decline in TOT from the year prior. That's a concern to you. It's a concern to staff. And thirdly, we have the factor of increased room capacity. When we prepared, and I put two different scenarios, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the scenarios, but the reality is we have a factor with a modest increase was put in when we put our projection for the 3.5 reflecting the Bardesano. It was a very soft, conservative estimate. But we really don't have any track record in trending. And we also don't know what the bottoming point of the current economic market is. So from that standpoint, I think it's very hard to make projections. So let's make some assumptions that we want to look at a reduction in expenditures in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. And a couple things that I want to point out. One, staff's been tasked with already working on an area where they can minimize current exposures in the fiscal year. Some of these will be deferral of items. Some of these will be decrease in frequency. Some will be other activities. And we've identified in the neighborhood of about $40,000 to $50,000 in the current budget, very easily done. We also have some other cost structures that we can go through that process in more detail. More importantly, we're concluding the process with our water sale. So that's going to result in the immediate reduction of general fund expense and your subsidy for current NBA water. So you're going to realize somewhere between $150,000 and $175,000. So what I want to really focus on is the fact that the town staff is working on scaling back your current revenues. More importantly, and I think this is the exercise I want us to look at, is focusing from the council perspective on bigger policy questions as we start building next year's budget. So if we assume that we're going to build next year's budget at a reduced level, and let's just say we carve 400,000. So instead of 3.5 million, we look at 3.1 million in TOT revenue. What's going to be more important for the council is to start providing some policy discussions. So with that, if you would turn to page 4 of the staff report, I'll start the dialogue a little bit here. Some of the questions is, what are the core service levels our available revenue can support? And what we're really talking about here is having an intelligent, thoughtful discussion that's saying, this budget represents X, and with X we can do this at this level. And you guys will, as we go through the budget, we're going to have a variety of opportunities to look. What I really want to focus on is starting to really identify and understand what we're getting for our money, whether it's contracted, whether it's done in-house, what the service level is, and if there's any consequences. What service reductions does the town council consider appropriate? What are the sacred cows? Programs, funding, whatever from either the council or staff or community that we may have to address. Those will probably be the most challenging. Is it appropriate to continue to provide significant general fund subsidy to the Water Enterprise Fund to cover operating expenses? And by that I mean our annual operating. The good news with what the council has done, and when we conclude that, is we will significantly reduce the level of potential general fund subsidy for operating. Second question, similar. Is it appropriate to continue to provide general fund subsidy to the Water Enterprise Fund for water infrastructure improvement projects? Typically, when the council has had excess general fund revenue, we have funded spot projects, whether it's a lateral replacement, water line replacement, things like that. The question on those is, should those be borne by the ratepayers exclusively or not? Council has a long history of providing a subsidy for that program. Similar question for the wastewater treatment plant operation. Should the town review all of our permits, fees, and charges to ensure that those costs are fully recovered? And what I want to look at here is that's developing cost recovery targets and also looking at things not only with our user fees and charges, but things like permits that are pulled out because a person's receiving a benefit. In other words, somebody's remodeling their house, they're paying for the inspection services. What we want to do is, I think it's important that we do an exercise with the council's direction as to what level of cost recovery is appropriate. Then we get into things like community service programs. What level of subsidy are you willing to establish for programs, therefore determining what level of rate do you want the users? And that could be 50%, 60%, but we need to have some thoughtful discussion about what level of program support and cost recovery targets. What capital improvement projects, such as street paving, street lighting, undergrounding, dog park, flood prevention measures, are we willing to defer? That may be 1 year, it may be longer. What planned projects is the town council willing to eliminate or defer for future years? And here I'm not talking capital, I'm talking things like increased community outreach. You know, putting more stuff on the website, doing more things requires an allocation of staff time to do those, and does that compete with other things? General plan update. That's got some dollar costs, both associated with consultants and the preparation. Do we even consider deferral the current financial software that we're looking at? Or do I do that in a phase? Our TOT audit. Subsidy for the Yountville shuttle. Employee training and development funding and support. 4th of July fireworks funding. Community grants program. Festival of Lights funding. Chamber of Commerce support. After school program. The list goes on in terms of some things. Now, what I want to do is change the tone. That sets the stage for what I think is important for the council to start beginning. I also want to give you order of magnitude of where we're at. The council this year had a slightly increased budget over what I told you was a maintenance budget. And we did that for two factors. One, we had significant one-time expenses primarily associated with our technology. We had approximately $50,000 in our server replacement of our server environment. We have approximately $200,000 in the upgrades necessary, including the hardware and the financial one-time for the financial software. You know, that will transition to maintenance. We also have a fairly significant line item cost for the one-time purchase of our video web streaming software. So the good news when I put all that in front of you is we don't need to spend the same $275,000 next year. That's going to be more on the magnitude of, you know, in the 50,000 range in terms of that. We also will not have the annual expense for the Kern NBA water of $250,000. Now, when you put that all together, we're at $450,000 plus or minus, and that's the real message that I wanted to send to the council and the community. But I also think it's important, really important, that we have to address those questions that I addressed, and that's where I need the council and the direction, because staff needs to know what we want to do in terms of what the council's expectations are. And as we move forward with our budget discussions, I think that's what's really important, because it's easy to say, go cut $400,000, and then have somebody else bring a bunch of items and then go, no, no, no. I think it's more important that you guys have a quality discussion about what are the parameters for doing those. And in addition, I mentioned we already have another $40,000 to $60,000 that we can bring in. And as we build our budget next year, based on your responses to those questions, we'll be able to be more thoughtful in how we're doing it. So I don't want us to overreact and send a message that we're not going to be capable of doing what we've historically done. I don't believe that to be the case. I believe even with prudent restructuring of our revenue, we can continue to deliver a high quality of service. But I also think it's really important that we do start having that discussion about what that service level is and recognize that we may not be able to do everything. And we may have to prioritize and look at certain things. And I think that's going to be a very healthy discussion.
Well, I think regardless of how much prioritizing and evaluating we do, one of the biggest issues we're going to be dealing with is the state and either delayed funds or well, long-term deferred funds, whatever they want to call it. So, I mean, that's a factor that's going to be challenging for us to identify, and it's going to be kind of evolving between now and all of our budget talks.
Absolutely, and I think, another one that's very interesting is, staff has already spent a considerable amount of time, and we'll spend more as we start understanding what the program requirements for federal stimulus funding are. But, we have no guarantee that all that time we're going to spend will result. But I think, you would all consider it appropriate staff time, because if we don't get what we could have, if we're able to get a grant or a low-cost or no-cost loan for our wastewater treatment program, that means the ratepayers and even the state don't have to pay as much. So we've got to do some stuff there. I also want to address one other thing that the council had brought up, which is it perhaps time to look at some modifications to the TOT ordinance? Council had made the comment that we need the information and we should be getting it more regularly than every 2 months. We've reviewed the ordinance, and the reality is we can change our reporting regularity, and staff would recommend that we hold a meeting with all the lodging properties and discuss that. Having a monthly report and submittal of payments is actually, the two models that are standard are what we have and monthly. Staff agrees that getting the information monthly allows us to monitor trend analysis. We don't have a vehicle to get the information in a way that we can make sure it's accurate and usable without our report structure. So, the idea of calling up everybody and saying, how are you doing, puts me in a spot, or the finance staff is being, well, that's what they told us. I mean, I don't know why it didn't come back. Whereas the current process we have a very good process of monitoring. And I have to give tremendous credit to our lodging properties in this town. They work well, they report well, they know that we monitor it, and they know that we have regular TOT audits. So we generally catch everything within the 3-year cycle legally. So, I think it probably is prudent to sit down and say, maybe it's time to go to monthly reporting, monthly, submittal of your payment, if that's something the council would like us to pursue. But I would suggest that we first have a meeting with some of the lodging properties and discuss that. As far as some recommendations, because you had asked this more as a briefing and kind of letting you know where we can see. One, I think we need to continue the monthly practice. You get a very good report from the finance director, and it's a great template, and I'm expecting Kathleen in her new position to even work and develop that further as we work on our reporting tools. But when we report on the budget situation, we're going to have to interpret and keep you abreast on a regular basis. And that's challenging when the state can be 6 months behind in what they're reporting to us. The good news is that we know where the primary funding source structure is. This town's not dependent on a whole lot of things. I mean, we know our property tax base. We know that's going up slightly. And we know we've got some activity that will go. We know that TOT and the sales tax associated with tourism are our bread and butter, and that's where we have to understand the nuance, and that's also where our elasticity is. So when it's slow, it's slow. And I think that also stands well to your goals of improving upon and increasing our reserve for a rainy day. And if there ever is a rainy day, what many of our communities are doing, you're seeing some of the neighboring jurisdictions draw down some of their reserves, some more than others. I'm not advocating that right now. I think we can internally, within our budget, do that. But I will point out that you do have an $825,000 general fund reserve. You also have $880,000 in unallocated general fund revenue that you've yet to allocate. So those are some information pieces that you still have in your planning and budget process. I'm also going to recommend that we'll have a more interesting footnote as to what the slow season looks like on March 30th when we get all of the season. We'll know if we're continuing the trend. And as I indicated to you, I'm saying let's anticipate a $300,000 cutback, and we'll scale back at our level to deliver that for you. And then as we begin our budget discussions for the council to start having those discussions about feedback to target areas for cuts or restructuring. I'm also suggesting that we incorporate that as our capstone for beginning the process, and we will begin that in earnest, and it pretty much will be a maintenance-less budget. And then provide direction on whether you would like to see us modify the TOT collection process from bi-monthly to monthly. With that, that's a very brief overview of a fairly detailed series of questions. Happy to answer questions or thoughts that you might have.
Council have any questions for staff at this time?
I've got comments, but no questions.
Questions?
I do have one question, Mayor, if I may. Regarding the fee structures and the recovery and our position on that, I'll refer specifically to the discussion with the community pool, and I think we need to consider the scheduling of those analyses, because we talked about basically putting off for a year the rate structure for the community pool so that we can gather enough hard evidence to who is coming, what are they paying, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something that can conceivably go well beyond this upcoming budget, but we need to at least get things in place in a schedule to make those determinations.
And there are lots of things when you're looking at your service delivery. For example, Kenneth is already working on some different scenarios for the pool. In our research, we learned that our pool was open the most hours of any Napa County pool. Maybe we need to cut back and have less frequency of some of our programs in order to maintain them and look at cost. With your support, I am having discussions about potential shared services in some different areas. So we're looking at some different service delivery mechanisms. This town is already a hybrid in terms of the fact that we use contracted and private vendors for a number of our support services. Some of those we need to evaluate because they're not always cost effective. Some cases they are, and we need to use more of them when that's the case. But those all go into the mixture, and that's where I think, Vice Mayor Dunbar, you're correct. Part of that is saying, what is the standard we want? And if we have a range, then that will help us address what the cost recovery. And I think you're right. We have, unfortunately, due to some of the financial software, we don't have all the best information and documentation to initially help us make some of these decisions, because that's not been, that isn't the way the system that we have was designed. And that's part of the fundamental recommendation that you all heartily endorse with making the changes, so that we can document and get that kind of information. But I do think we can do some better program budget analysis of some of those. And then, some of them are simple enough to say, which is, these ranges of service we want full recovery. For example, building permit, planning charges, encroachment permits. And then where you're going to have more qualitative discussion, in my opinion, is on the community services, where we don't we provide senior services, and some we do at general fund costs, some at a reduced revenue, same for our youth services. So that's where some of that challenge will be a little bit more involved for the council.
Councilmember Dutton?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the TOT, and you talked quite a bit about it, Steve, but you did indicate in there, I thought you said, where this is a great system that's going now, and the way they, on the 2-month reporting period, and it seems to work very well. I certainly understand that, but as you really reflect back, and it's great when things are going good. Okay, we know it's going to be whatever, but I think in times like this, and especially when you're talking 70% of our income. That's like somebody working and not knowing what you're going to get paid in 2 months from now.
Let me clarify. What I was saying, Bill, is I actually support the going to monthly after the consultation. What I was saying, they do a great job, is we've got a good structure, and our properties fill out the reports, submit timely. We don't I have worked in communities where staff is out chasing hotel properties to make their payment, submit the paperwork, and I just want to compliment our properties do that well. They understand that and work with us. That was, but I'm just, so if we want to go to a 1 month because we think that's where we need to be, I fully support that and would encourage that.
Well, and let me just throw something out, and I don't know, because I think it's both beneficial to ourselves and also to the businesses, in a sense, that we can make reactions that we have to, or adjustments. But I did see in another jurisdiction, it made a little bit of sense where they were looking just for the information, and they suggested that they get the information by the 15th of the month after it closes. Now, I'm sure with the way the computers are and all the infrastructure, that's probably not going to be a real hard thing for these inns. Now, as far as the revenue is concerned, when they come, they come. I don't know if you want to press them on that issue type much, but I think it'd be more important than we have the information say, within, say, 15 days after the month closes, to really be, on time. As far as the revenue, if it works in their system.
In talking with most of them, if they've got to fill out the report and give it to us, we might as well get the monthly submission. That's all I'm saying. If we want them, that's what we can sit down and talk to them, but we would have to change our ordinance so that there would be some type of penalty for noncompliance if they didn't give us the information. I think it's worth having a meeting with them to see how they would feel about it. And I would point out it's our money, not theirs, that they're holding on to for the 60 days.
Well, I understand. Well, and maybe that's it. You have to have the meeting and just see how equipped they are, to get you what you want and how fast.
Councilmember Chilton?
Well, let me make a couple of comments about this specific issue. I do agree that I think monthly reporting and payment is not out of the norm. Sales tax, you generally pay even an estimated amount by about the 20th or the third week of every month. The final quarterly report, you get to the end of that month. So you do have to make those payments. I can say that these forms, as simple as they may be, are really kind of they're a pain. It adds paperwork. So I would encourage, and I'm sure that the business community would as well, if we can look at the reports and say, is there anything on there that we gather that we don't really need, that we can make their life easier, then I think that would be a positive thing as well. But I can tell you right now, on the 28th, the 30th, or the 31st of every single month, every night on that last day of the month, I go and run a report and see how my business did for that month, and I can tell you that night. And I can guarantee you they're the exact same way. So it's reasonable to give, I think the 15 days is a reasonable amount of time to do that. But this is a cash flow issue, and this is we need to make sure we talk to the business community and give them adequate time to adjust to that reality. Because what I don't want to do is make a cash flow change that benefits the town, but do it to the business community at possibly the worst possible time economically. So I think meeting with them, I'm sure there'll be some resistance, but there'll be some good conversation as well.
Good. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Comments?
More comments on all this?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, so we're coming on everything. I guess the sacred cow to me is water rates. I'm, 5 years down the road, if this recession just keeps going and going, I'll entertain it. But right now, I think that is a sacred cow to me, and it has been to the town for many, many years. So that's certainly my opinion on that one. And a lot of the other ones, I think I just have to see some more information before I can make some decisions. This is just too nebulous for me to really say much on. I mean, I would say that I'd want you to go through the budget and decrease revenues, increase the revenues that really don't impact the citizens in general. If you can get more for a permit, if somebody's building a new house here or something that doesn't affect everyone, that's fine. But I don't really have the information to really kind of assess that in detail here. And so I'm not in favor of increasing anybody's bills right now, given this current environment. I think that we need to dig a little deeper and make some other cuts rather than increasing general revenues for general people that live in the town. Is that the kind of feedback you're looking for in a very general way?
Yes, this
Okay.
is not meant, this is really, that's exactly what we're looking at, or where are the areas of emphasis, and then letting you all know that as we begin our budget discussions, we'll bring back some of these, and we can do some illustrations. I mean, for example, there are a lot of building permit fees and charges that fall into the category you just talked about. And we will
Right.
probably spend more time talking about those that fall into the different categories where they may affect different people differently. So that is exactly the type of feedback we're looking for.
And, you know, with developers, I mean, we should be at industry standards there. I mean, if we're below that, I would raise those.
Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that comment up. Our fees have to be based on our cost. We're not allowed to make a profit.
Right.
Which is a very fascinating, because it's a very fascinating challenge, but we
For a
can cost
municipality,
recover,
right.
which is also why it's a very important exercise that the town has not done, to my understanding, in quite a while, to make sure that we fully cost recover, and that includes, staff. It's more than just staff time, but there's our risk management costs.
But do you need to buy software to do that, or do you have all the tools now to do that?
The software that we're talking about is going to be critical, but in terms of being able to analyze what the cost would be, what we really need is time. What we've got to do is go through and say, here's the methodology. I'll use a hypothetical for a building permit. Let's say it's a standard kind of over-the-counter building permit. The building inspector is going to go out for 2 visits. Each visit's roughly a half hour. So then what you do is, who else touches that? So you've got a half hour twice for the building inspector. You've got the front counter 15 minutes, depending on what their transaction is. You've got some of Bob's time. You've got a factor. So really what it comes down to is you develop the formula, then you throw your admin, overhead expense, vehicles, things like that, and then you come up and you publish that, and that's your methodology for your fee. And you do a similar exercise for most of those. That's what we really need to do on a number of those. And
But
then,
my question is, if you only have, say, 3 permits, it doesn't make sense to spend 20 hours to figure out how to make, an extra $6.
No,
So
we have-
you need a real top-level way of looking at some of these things before you do that, right?
No.
Or you have all that?
the way you described it, we don't have it, and it's not quite as simple as you're leading into. We can get there with what we have. What we're talking about doing will help us get there and maintain it even better. One of the things that I'd also like to work on is adoption of a master user fee ordinance. And the reason being is right now our charges are all over the place. And with a master user fee ordinance, we would adopt our methodology, and then if there was an increase or a decrease, we'd reflect that appropriately. So most of that's just time, and then using the software and then updating it. And that's why, for the most part, I wouldn't, when we report on that, we would talk about our current fee is X. We've done the methodology, and we're now recommending Y based on, here's what the building inspector cost. Or the other staff that's involved in, and that transaction on average, because, there may be a transaction that the building inspector is involved with that takes twice as long, and there may be one that doesn't require the second visit because everything's okay. And then we have, the good news is the town uses a lot of our land use development. We use what's called a deposit mechanism, which is the developer places a deposit. We charged against that on a time and materials basis. So we use very much a private sector consulting format on that. And we just need to make sure that that's accurate, that we're collecting everything, and that we're charging appropriately. So we've got to go through all of our areas where there's potential cost recovery. I would also say that that's good business practice once we get it in place, and then maintaining it.
I would just want to add one thing, Mayor. I think in going through this, and I agree with Councilperson Mulder, it's awfully hard to just look at this thing and say, geez, here we go. Might I suggest that when you give direction as far as setting up the budgets, I mean, if you come in with a what I would say, a prudent budget, one that's, looked at these issues. It's going to be a lot less cumbersome on our parts, to say, well, we got to take care of that, we got to take care of that. I would, if it can be pre-done, knowing that, going in, we've got a little, issues here that we're going to have to look at.
I hear you, but I really wanted this to be a primer because I want you to see how involved what you're really asking when somebody says, just go cut the budget. I appreciate Councilmember Moeller saying Sacred Cow's water rates. So then, the concern I have is if those consider to go up in the operating cost, at what point do we address that? Mm-hmm. Or do we? And at what level are we looking at our revenue stream? So you're right. There are no specific recommendations here other than that we're going to engage in the dialogue, that there will be a scale back in the current year revenues in addition to what we're currently getting from the current NBA water, and that becomes our starting point. I'll take that. We will work to come up with you, for example, Community Services Director is working on basically a reduced program. We may, instead of having 5 activities a month, what if we scale it back to 4, or a program only meets once? And then we've got some that we are doing well on cost recovery, so it doesn't make sense to change because we've covered it. So we've got some homework to do, but really what I wanted to get is some understanding of what are some of those values and principles at the council.
Well, since you brought up the water rates, I think in the past, that's, we've been real well, so that was one way to really benefit, basically all of the citizens, sort of pass on some of what we've had in excess. If we're not going to have the excess, maybe that's something we have to look at. And that, that's certainly right. And obviously something like that benefits all the residents, certainly some a heck of a lot more than others. But I think you have to look at that too down the long run, because I think one of the, the issues is basically everything should stand on itself if it has a chance, so to speak. Now, I understand there'll be some that we have to look at. There's some things that'll never stand on their own.
And that's kind of, right, Councilmember Dutton, that's sort of what a little bit of when staff goes in, because, for example, we brought back different recommendations on pool rates, but it's really kind of hard for us to go, oh, here's let's do a 10% cost recovery, a 20% cost recovery, a 35%. So on some of these, we need to do a better job of giving you some targets that are, and then some of them, when you're sending me some of your input, we'll incorporate that. But again, I really want to stress, part of this is just starting this discussion, getting you guys primed for what you're going to see and what we're going to need your input from and the communities as we go through the budget process. Because there, something may not be funded at the same level next year, or, a street project that was planned may be deferred a year. And the good news, I think, is that we can ride out a year or two cycle right now and maintain core levels at a relatively strong level of service to the community.
Councilmember Chilton?
Thank you. To me, right now, I think the preservation of our reserves are in a nearly untouchable situation. The general fund, and particularly that unallocated reserve. I think reserves are for bad times, and we could see bad times on the road, but I don't think we're there yet. And I think preserving those, to me, is number one priority. I think the water subsidy, the fact that we are going to have such a large decrease in the water subsidy next year, to me, I think we see a lot of savings on that, and I agree this is not the time to increase water rates. Why the state and the federal government thinks that in a bad economy it's a good time to raise taxes, I don't think it is here. I absolutely think you should go forward with financial software. I think it would be a short-sighted mistake to look at that as a cost savings, one, because of the efficiency factor, and two, the information factor. So I definitely think that's something to not skimp on. Untouchables, clearly, fire, police, safe operation of our wastewater treatment plant. These are things that are just simple that we absolutely must do. I do think sorry, Ken, that there are certain things in recreation that I would consider to be elective that the town provides. I don't personally know what the rate recovery is on a trip to the outlet malls, for example. I do think it's good that the town has taken a lot of efforts to join up with the other cities up Valley. I'm sure that shares some of the costs, so that's positive. I do believe the after-school program is an untouchable in terms of a program, but should have a pretty high cost recovery, which it does. And I know some of our expenses may go up because the school district is looking for every dollar and penny it can find, and they're gonna come after us for a little bit more money. I think that's an incredible service that a lot of people in town and the larger community need, and we can provide that at virtually full cost recovery, and we should. Other things, you've listed a lot of things here that, you're right, 4th of July fireworks or community grants or Festival of Lights, et cetera. Those are some really positive things this community does that we don't want to cut. I don't think we'll have to, but those kind of come on the secondary list. So we have to start asking those questions if we can't find enough in that. And I want to bring up one other issue that does concern me greatly, is if we are talking about decreases in TOT revenue numbers, I also, at least we're going to need it to be looked at of, is the 2% that we've been projecting going to cover the debt on the community center, and is that going to be a gain or a loss? And right now, with those extra expenses, even as we keep those down, we want to have a facility that is useful, and that's an additional cost that we're going to have in the next year or two that concerns me. So that's something when budget time comes around. And I think other council members have made an excellent point. When we see budget numbers, you can go down line item and say, this one's $3,000 savings, but a lot of people use it, but this one's $25,000. Those are the hard choices to make. I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that for the rest of this fiscal year, unless things deteriorate significantly again in the next report, that you guys are able to look within departments and find that $50,000 and make some proposals that is necessary, that is not a significant cut of what we see and does not go into reserves.
That is correct.
Okay, so I think that's good. The budget process will be probably more interesting this year than most years, and there'll be a lot of detail that we can consider then. Thank you.
Good comments. Any more comments?
Let's make a couple comments of consideration. They're not necessarily specific line items, but maybe we reevaluate cleanup day. That's a cost that, while it's a great service to the community, and I'd like to see it continue, we might need to consider changing it. Maybe instead of going around to every residence in town, we allow people to bring things to a central location and then we dispose of it, or something like that, if we want to look at some cost recovery there. Does it make sense, even though it would cost money, to get an enforcement officer? Because that person, whether it be for parking, whether it be for illegal use of a permit, whatever it might be that could allow us to generate revenue through fines or whatever it might be, and also the enforcement of the regulations they're supposed to be following, because I don't think with our staff, the way it's set up now, I know we talked specifically about Bob has to run around and red tag things that he can see, but do we really want him running around town trying to identify if there's anything going on with any development? Probably not. His time is better served somewhere else. I think we should be a little more aggressive about trying to get grant funding, whether it be state or federal. Again, that takes time and staff. And would it make sense to try to employ a grant writer sometime during the year where we feel like there might really be some money out there?
You know, it's really interesting on that. As my inbox and email has been received with all sorts of, come to this program, $900, we'll show you how to apply for your grants, $1,200, we'll write them. I think right now that's an important thing, but you really have to understand our demographics and the program. Our focus right now, working on state and federal stimulus money is pretty direct. I think we got to stay attentive, and staff will stay focused on those. And some of the other stuff, we've got to be careful that we can spend a lot of staff time chasing something that we really don't have any chance of getting, and that's not good use of our resources. But I do think there are a handful that we really can.
And that leads to my next point, which is both more aggressive public-private partnerships and also more aggressive partnerships with other jurisdictions in the county. And I think our recent affordable housing partnership with the Board of Supervisors is a perfect example of us not being able to stand alone on a very important project, but when we got their input, it made it all happen for us. And I don't want to, again, staff and potentially money, but I think it may benefit in the long run. And then the only other thing I wrote down here was if there are incentives that we can attach for, I know the ZDRB is already talking about green building practices and an ordinance. Are there ways that we can save money by doing things differently and really be more a part of this sustainability evolution, really, and maybe save costs, maybe take advantage of low-cost services right now?
Well, and I also think, it leads to another one of those discussions, which are, we got a lot of ordinances and stuff that were written back in a different day and a different time, and are they serving what we want to do? Not only in terms of can we modify them, and that helps the business community, can we modify it, it helps the residents, can we modify it, and it makes, are our own processes, are we touching something 5 times that we only need to touch 3? And frankly, Bob and I have identified one, which is our concurrent preliminary concept and final land use process is very cumbersome and very staff time, both from the applicant and for all of you and staff. So there are some internal processes that I think with this kind of support, staff will work on inside of those.
And I think Councilmember Chilton touched on it with the technology. I know the town clerk would certainly agree that so much time and energy is going to be saved by actually getting caught up to the 21st century here with some of these things. So it makes sense in some cases to spend that money. And, the cost recovery on our water loss, another perfect example of the dramatic savings in our water loss from leakage, being able to identify it using modern technology. So
exactly. And I think, my dad's a big fan of duct tape. But, there's only so much duct tape that you can use on certain things, and then you've actually, really got to replace or repair the item as opposed to just using duct tape. And I think we've got a staff that has really tried hard, but in some cases we've used a lot of duct tape, and it's time to make the next investment in the resources and tools that are going to help us achieve what we need to do. And there is a cost payback on those. Helpful? And we'll begin, unless there's additional comments.
Very helpful, Steve, and I just want to remind the council that the previous item that we discussed under tab 11, council goals and objectives, with those goals and objectives, they all carry related costs associated with them. And I would support the continuing of the current practice of monthly reporting. It's very helpful for us in making our decisions. A review of the budget after the March 30 TOT, I can certainly support that. And at that point, we might be able to come back with you for some more specific ideas in terms of budget costs or reductions. And as far as using the feedback that you'll get from us and during future reports and council meetings, definitely in developing the proposed budget, and as far as the TOT modification, I can support that. And I'm sure once we meet with the business community and run it past them, they'll be comfortable with that. It's just getting used to it. It's a matter of adjusting your time schedules for reporting purposes. So with that, I hope you have enough information to kick it off, and we'll discuss it again. Item 13, town
I saw
attorney.
Kathleen taking notes. So.
Yeah, Kathleen was taking a lot of notes. We're going to have fun, Kathleen. Don't worry about it. Item 13, town attorney services. Consider adoption of a new resolution appointing an interim town attorney. Do we have a staff report?
Very briefly, The town council has the responsibility for the appointment of the town manager and the town attorney. Earlier, we were notified that Ms. Valukovich left the firm Coombs and Dunlap, and she had been working as the town's designated attorney. Prior, the council gave me direction to do a request for proposal for town attorney services, and you've interviewed both Coombs and Dunlap and Ms. Valukovich for potential consideration for interim town attorney services. So the action before you tonight is threefold. One, to confirm the action that you would like the town manager to do the RFP. Secondly, to make a determination as who will be providing your interim services. And thirdly, to direct the town manager, working with the ad hoc committee, to negotiate the appropriate interim services agreement or modification as appropriate based on your selection tonight.
Does council have any questions for staff? All righty. We did interview both applicants earlier this evening, and the council did discuss in closed session our findings, and we're prepared to discuss those findings now and appoint an interim legal services for the brief period until the RFP is submitted and we receive applications to the RFP and land on a new representatives for the town's legal services. How does council wish to proceed? Any discussion?
Well,
Councilmember Chilton?
just a couple of comments, as no one attended from the public the earlier session. I would, this is to me an unusual situation because it's very difficult to assess what the status quo is. This town has had a contract with Coombs and Dunlap for decades, but the town attorney that we have had for the past 4 years, or almost 4 years, has left there. So I'm not sure that we're in a status quo situation staying with Coombs and Dunlap. I'm not sure we're in a status quo situation with Ms. Valukovich. And my initial reaction has been that, one, I absolutely believe that we should go through an RFP process, which seems to have complete agreement on. The town should assess all of its options. I think that those options may actually be quite difficult to assess once they come in. But I've had the belief that, and I've gone back and forth on it, that whether it would be best to stay with Coombs and Dunlap, considering what I consider somewhat a lack of municipal experience currently, versus Amy. My preference is I believe that we should maintain our current relationship with Coombs and Dunlap for this interim period of 3 to 4 months. I believe that is the most status quo that we would have. I don't think either solution is a great solution, but I would like to have a very open process when that comes along.
Good. Thank you. Councilmember Dutton?
Well, I would concur with Councilman Chilton in his comments there. It is a little awkward. Unfortunately, I'm going to take just the opposite thing, and I think we should stick with the person who has been doing our work for us here, the individual, not the law firm. So basically, I think Amy should be retained during this interim period.
Thank you. Councilmember Mueller?
I agree with Councilmember Chilton.
Vice Mayor?
Well, I think we do have two reasonable options here. It is challenging, as has been stated. It kind of boils down to, do we go with the individual who's most familiar with the status of the town? And we are talking about a projected 3 or 4 month period as the interim period. So that weighs heavily on me in the sense that while I was impressed both by, and I'm going to use Preston and Is it Karen? I'm sorry. Because I can't remember, I can't pronounce your last name. Poiré? Okay. I could have. Anyway, I'm very impressed with your presentations tonight and your comments, and I am just uncomfortable that the period we're talking about, this 3 or 4 month period, is right about the time that you would all be ramping up to understand what's happening. And so I encourage you to participate in the request that we'll be making for long-term services, but I feel like the familiarity that we have with Amy and that she has with the town kind of trumps anything else. And it doesn't really boil down to cost for me at this point. It's a short time period. I think they're comparable. We don't even, we didn't talk numbers, but I just sense that while an individual may be able to avoid some of the overhead costs of a law firm, you also don't have those same support services that the law firm can provide us. So I would support staying with Amy for the short term, and then we really do need to evaluate what's best for the town for the long term.
Thank you for your comments. I would tend to agree with the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Dutton's decision. I feel more comfortable working with someone whose primary focus is municipal law, who has worked with the town for approximately 4 years and is very familiar with the town's issues and the town staff, and has worked very well with them in the past. So I can support going with Ms. Velukovich for the interim, and would hope that both agencies or law firms would submit a response to our request for proposal for long-term representation.
Well, then I'll make a motion, resolution number 2762-09.
I need the council to make one change in item 1, because it was a placeholder saying you had to tell us what you wanted. So you need to insert, the council has made a decision to retain Amy Velukovich as interim town attorney.
Do we also need to add that we want to do it on a month-to-month basis?
You can add that. I believe that's my knowledge of how you want to approach the interim services, but I'm comfortable with adding that.
That would go under the word appropriate agreement.
Parentheses.
I'll continue with the resolution number 2762-09 to appoint as interim town attorney Amy Velukovich, attorney at law, and directing the town manager to review and negotiate an agreement for the interim town attorney services, and appoint an ad hoc committee to continue working with the town manager to develop and issue a request for proposal for town attorney services.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. That motion carries. Thank you. And we already have an ad hoc committee in place. Did you want to
Yes.
change that?
No.
Okay.
Could you remind me who the ad hoc committee is? I don't think
Vice Mayor and myself.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Item 14, Town Council.
Yes, I'm going to say, continuing on the theme of ad hoc committees.
And actually, if I could just ask for clarification, Mayor, when does this decision take effect?
It would probably take effect as soon as we can get the agreement. I've got the agreement scheduled back, coming for the council adoption on the 17th.
So legal services until a new agreement is reached will be still covered under Coombs and Dunlap?
That would be correct.
So for up to the next 2 weeks?
Or if an agreement is not reached, then that may cause a reconsideration of where that's at.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Town Council ad hoc committee appointments. Staff report?
Briefly, when we were going over some of our plans, we realized that we're moving forward with the seismic retrofit space needs analysis. Former council member Steve Rosa and council member Bill Dutton were the committee. We need a new appointment to replace council member Rosa on that committee, and I do have a need to meet with them and to prepare the public presentation on the report. Also, based on the success that we had using an ad hoc committee on the finance director recruit, I would like to request a similar one for the public works director recruitment, and also what I'm calling the community services director review/recruitment. That is the area where, with your support, I've also engaged conversations on shared services and different delivery mechanisms. But I think having 2 council members to work with on those topics, and you could make them all the same, you can make them different, but I do think that has been a productive use of ad hoc committees on an interim basis, and would like to continue that if that's something the council would like to do.
Councilmember Chilton has expressed an interest in serving with Councilmember Dutton on the seismic retrofit space needs analysis. Are you still interested in serving on that committee, Councilmember Dutton?
Sure.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Okay. Anyone interested in serving on the ad hoc committee for the recruitment of Public Works Director?
I can help.
I'll save myself for community services.
Okay.
So was I.
Now, everybody can't be on community services. Anybody want to work with Councilmember Mueller on Public Works Director recruitment?
Oh, okay. Well, I have enough already. I mean, are we expecting like a couple of interviews in the same situation?
I am expecting, one, I have the advertising material will be going out shortly. It's almost finished. You approved the job description changes tonight. So, really the work will be when we start doing some of the screening. I met with each of you to explain the screening, set up the process. So we're not talking a ton of work, but it's also, I'll let you know how the recruitment's doing, and then we will involve you in the secondary screening aspect where you had, not the initial interviews of the top 8. I met with everybody to.
Right.
Councilmember Chilton will serve on that ad hoc committee.
It's fine. If you want to, but I'll do it. I mean.
I like talking to engineers.
More short.
Yeah.
Shorter term, yeah.
That's why I like it.
Oh, that's.
You can, Bill. I won't take that away from you.
No, whatever.
Okay, so who's doing it?
Now they're going to fight over it.
It's Lewis and Margie for Public Works.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to serve on the ad hoc committee for Community Services Director. Would anybody like to?
Well, since I'm the only one that hasn't chimed in yet, unless, Bill, you would really like to do that one.
Oh, he's on
No, we spread
town
it
hall
out.
side.
That's fine.
Hey, that's everybody.
Okay?
Okay.
Can we trade these down the line if we...
Sure.
Well, I think that is a good consideration, that depending on some of your commitments, we may need somebody to fill in if somebody else, like, if the interview date's on X and somebody's not available, with the concurrence of the committee, it may be appropriate to ask for somebody else to sit in.
Item 15, staff informational reports. Are there any additional reports?
I have a report on
Staff
the
informational reports? Staff.
Not council.
update of staff.
Staff.
No.
Thank you. Council reports and comments. We did, flood control did meet today. We got some disappointing news. Our FEMA grants were rejected. As it works out, I guess you can't apply for a federal grant on a federally funded project that's already federally funded. So we kind of found that out at the 11th hour, and those monies were to go to the Napa Creek project. What else did we discover? Oh, well, it was all bad news. But anyway, so far, no flooding issues in the county, no serious flooding damage. Everything's draining well. All the creeks and waterways are draining well, and we've been very fortunate because this has been a definite storm, dumping a lot of water. And we did, of course, discuss the water issue and water reserves and who's got water and who doesn't have water. and who's going to be needing water. And so Yountville's still sitting pretty with respect to that. So Upper Valley Waste Management?
Well, that was a while back, but just a couple of things, and I noticed, Bob, that you did have it in one of the conditions of approval, and I appreciate it as far as any C&D work that's done, and that would affect Sereno and certainly Zeta, that they would use, whatever, follow the guidelines for the GPA that we have within the Upper Valley. That's good. And the other one would just be, it's passed, but we did have that e-waste pickup. I didn't get a chance to mention at the last meeting. We ran out of time, but we did get it out, I think, on the television, and then a few flyers. It must have been successful because one of the guys called me up saying, geez, how'd you get my name on here? I got 70 phone calls, and I'm not involved in this. And I said, geez, I hope they're all from Yountville. And that means it worked out good. So, but anyway, we did have it. So I don't know, did you put your stuff out? Or?
No, I was going.
You didn't do it, Bob. Say.
Should have done it.
I shouldn't ask you that. I apologize. I did, and they came by and got it. So hopefully it was the Boy Scouts that did it.
Yeah.
Similar to their Christmas tree pickup.
I got your 5 TVs.
It was noted in the Yountville Sun. Thank you, Sharon.
Anything else? Bill, anything else?
Oh.
No. Councilmember Chill,
wake up here.
can you report on the NCTPA meeting we had?
NCTPA met almost 2 weeks ago now, I believe. Couple of items, Caltrans, 2 items that I thought I would note. One of which is probably the most significant Caltrans project that we were going to see in this general area is the Rutherford roundabout is actually going to go forward, which will be really interesting. I love roundabouts, but that's going to be fascinating. As well, I brought up I had a realization of a small little pet peeve of mine when I was having a delivery done of a piece of equipment to the deli, and the gentleman who had printed out a map on MapQuest was lost because his map says exit Highway 29 to California Drive. And if you've noticed, coming north on 29, it never says California Drive on any of the 5 signs that say Yountville. So I brought up that issue to Caltrans, partly because I hope we can get it fixed, and secondly to see just how long it takes them to put up a sign that says California Drive. So we'll see where that goes. A couple of items that were discussed. 1 or 2 items that got a lot of press just in the last week. One is the NCTPA is moving forward with a plan to do an analysis of the Highway 29 corridor, and also the cross-county corridor that goes from Solano over to Sonoma, as that's really a focus of a lot of the traffic problems. There's some state grants that can be gained in that, so that's something that is moving forward, and especially for the South County cities is a huge issue, but I think is an economic issue for even Yountville. If you come up from San Francisco on the weekend and you get stuck in American Canyon, it makes you less likely to come up Valley. The second one is there was a large front page article about the inventory that was done regarding carbon dioxide in the county, where its sources are coming from. This stems from AB 32 and SB 375, the global warming bills. And I think that's something, I know the Vice Mayor went to, I think Bob went to an informational meeting on that. The League of Cities is talking about it. This is one of the most interesting laws, in my opinion, to come across the books, and in many ways with very little fanfare back in 2006. One of my concerns with that law, one is I don't believe that local officials have the tools needed to implement what the law has asked for in terms of extremely aggressive CO2 reduction targets. And secondly, that may lead to one of the greatest assaults on local land use regulations that we've seen in a long time over the next 10 years. That's one of the reasons League of Cities has taken that up, and hopefully there can be some work done to make those a little more realistic and within our purview. Because if you don't like Sacramento making decisions on local land use, you should be paying attention to this. The last item dealt with, and Steve brought this up, specifically with transportation funding coming from the so-called stimulus package out of Washington. It's kind of interesting, $800 billion spending bill. Less than 10% of that's actually going to transportation infrastructure, even though that's all we hear about with the bill. The Bay Area as a whole is getting less than $1 billion of that, and the funding mechanisms will go through, I believe it was through the MTC's funding formulas, which mean about $50,000 is going to hit here in Yountville, which is better than nothing, but not going to go very far. So that's one thing that all of the jurisdictions are working on. Another item that's really kind of a partnership with Napa County and the small cities in the county to try to make sure that as small jurisdictions we're not overlooked. And there's some partnership things going on there which are pretty interesting. So that was NCTPA, a lot going on there.
I think you forgot one really important topic.
And there was one thing that Cindy really thought was important. And what was that, Cindy?
We received a presentation on the feasibility study for a Class 1 bike path from Calistoga to American Canyon, and it can be done. It was a very good presentation, gave us all the alternatives that we needed to look at, and there was a lot of support for this program. And all the jurisdictions kicked in $20,000 for the feasibility study, and we may as well see where we can go from there. And that was one of the options that they gave us. It was a very good presentation.
And having remembered that presentation, one of the good things was, at least for Yountville, is they prioritize different legs of that bike trail. And some are more difficult for a variety of reasons, whether it's access issues or getting easements. Yountville, I think, was #1 on the list of the most achievable of all the segments of the bike trail, which is good. And this is a great part of the valley for it.
We'll be bringing you back some. That has the potential, depending on how there's some allocation, to be a priority project under the stimulus. So we may need to make some staff adjustments to take advantage of that, because obviously if we're able to get, here I'm talking about a grant, that will save us from expense future having to do that. So that's something staff is, Mike and Paul and I are working attentively on, and there's a very good chance that we may receive $1 million on that particular project that we're tracking now.
Thank you.
One other item not related to NCPA while we're going around. There are a couple of gentlemen up at the Veterans Home who started a project, Project Kicks. I think most people have heard of it by now. If you haven't, it's a project to raise money to buy shoes for children in South Africa who don't own a single pair of shoes. They're doing a raffle right now to raise money for the April trip. You can buy those raffle tickets at Yountville Deli at 6498 Washington Street, and that benefits that program, which is, I think, not only a worthy cause, but one of the things I like about that program the most is it's just a couple of guys who got together and said, let's help some folks out, and that's the way these projects should be. So if you can help them out, that would be terrific.
Vice Mayor, you want to report on League of California Cities?
Sure, I'll do two, since it's right on the heels of Councilmember Chilton talking about Assembly Bill 32 and Senate Bill 375. AB 32 is the greenhouse gas emissions law that says we'll be required to return to 1990 levels of greenhouse gas emissions by 2020. And then SB 375 pretends to tell us how we're going to get there by restricting gases emitted by light trucks and automobiles. And Kira Ross and Bill Higgins are two lobbyists. Basically, they don't call themselves lobbyists, but they are for the analysts for the League of California Cities, very bright young people that have somehow enough energy to put up with what they have to go through in Sacramento. But specifically, Mr. Higgins addressed, as Louis, as you mentioned, about the tools that are going to be required to implement these things. And he gave a pretty involved presentation, and Bob and I were both there and brought back some extra materials in case anyone has insomnia and would like to go through that. But it has to do with a whole kind of a complicated mix of regional planning for transportation and housing, more local planning for housing, like our implementation of our state mandated numbers and how we try to mix future land use. It doesn't apply so much for Yountville because we don't have that much land, but there were certainly a lot of larger cities there represented that were very interested in hearing his comments, and also just about the concerns that if we don't act, the Air Resources Board, among other state agencies, will act on our behalf, and we may not like their ideas. So it's encouraging that we try to get out front of those efforts. Keeping to the League of California Cities theme, most of the council and some staff went to the North Bay Division meeting in Benicia. Was it 2 weeks ago or a week ago? And there was a representative there. He's representing a group called California Forward, which is a very interesting group. They've received $25 million in money to play with. They're kind of like a budget think tank, where they have been tasked with coming up with structural reform for the state budget. So if they can do it in 25 million or less, more power to them. They're not the only group that's doing that, but this gentleman, I don't remember his name and didn't write it down, but he was very impressive and had some interesting comments about what's wrong with the state budget, and didn't, he professed his political affiliation but did not dwell on that. It was really more about the nuts and bolts of how we can maybe get things going, whether it's to get a different threshold for voting on the budget or that type of thing. So hopefully there'll be some progress with that for future budgets. Then if you want, I can just finish off a couple other things here. One, I would just like to recognize the Board of Supervisors. I brought it up earlier. I would encourage the council, even though the entire council did not vote in favor of the partnership that they have with us regarding the affordable housing in town, I would encourage the council to send a letter of support and appreciation to the board, thanking them for their partnership. And I think it goes beyond just whether you support the affordable housing and the money for that. I think it's critical that we partner with the county, and some of the issues that came up in discussion tonight, various items, I think may come down to having partnerships outside of Yountville, and I think this is a good example of at least acknowledging that, if not trying to enhance it. Then one last thing, and I know Councilmember Moeller is going to speak to this, the Heritage Oak Tree and Hopper Creek area. The preparation to the ad hoc committee met, and Alan Tenscher and Dick Siebert were a couple representatives from the community. Mr. Siebert represented the Homeowners Association from Hopper Creek, though he made it quite clear he was not speaking directly on their behalf, nor was Mr. Tenscher speaking on anybody's behalf in particular, but it was really a brainstorming meeting. We received some of the comments that a group of citizens put together when they met independently. So it's been, I think on behalf of the whole council, I'll say thank you to the residents that have participated and given us some ideas to consider. The town has received the Department of Fish and Game permit approving the removal of the tree, but we have postponed that action. I think everybody probably knows that by now, and are pursuing all options that we have prior to removal of the tree. And town manager and our Public Works Director, Mike Prawl, were also in attendance at the meeting, and we're providing some feedback on how we want to create this ad hoc committee. We're going to reach out to the community and put some community members on it, as well as staff and Councilmember Moeller and myself. So we're hoping in the next couple of weeks to meet and really start to try to move things forward. But maybe that leads into Councilmember Moeller, if you had any additional summary on that.
Those were all the points that we agreed to go over.
Okay.
Any other comments? Councilmember Moeller?
No.
Okay. As long as we're plugging benefits, I just want to remind everyone that the Red and White Affair is this weekend. It's at the Silverado Winery. All the proceeds go to benefit the Yountville Elementary School, so I hope you can attend. It's a wonderful event. It's for a good cause, and I think you can get tickets at the elementary school. Item 17, Future agenda items, the Knight subdivision, looks like we're going to address some more land use issues in the coming weeks. Commercial properties, frontage improvement standards, community services program annual report for 2008, and the mosquito abatement district annual report for 2008. Item 18.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We adjourn to the Tuesday meeting on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Don't forget to wear your green. Thank you.